Chapter 1. During my passionate youth, I fell deeply in love with my wife and spoiled her rotten. For her, I was willing to give up everything, study with her, strive with her in the big city, and settle down with her in a smaller one. To marry her, I humbled myself and met all of her family's unreasonable demands. For over a decade of marriage, because of my unconditional tolerance, we were known as the model couple. I thought we would be happy forever, until I discovered the secret on my wife's phone. "Baby, I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. It's okay, I've already taken the pill. Why do you have to start touching me as soon as we get into the office?" They haven't left yet. I couldn't believe that my aloof wife would betray our marriage. When I confronted her with the evidence, she simply said if I wanted to continue living a good life, I should act blind. Thinking back on all the years of tolerance, a raging fire ignited within me. Since you two shameless adulterers have no shame, don't blame me for being ruthless. My mother, holding my grandson, casually mentioned her shift must have been tiring. She showered and went straight to bed as soon as she got home. I paused and shook my head, chuckling. "Mom, Chung-Yu and I have been married for over a decade. Don't overthink it. Even if every other woman in the world cheated, Chung-Yu wouldn't." I had that confidence. I met Chung-Yu in high school. During our passionate youth, I fell deeply in love with her and spoiled her. To pursue her, I gave everything. To help her improve her grades, I spent most of my time tutoring her one-on-one, ultimately controlling my own scores to ensure we attended the same university. After graduation, Chung-Yu wanted to stay in the big city to pursue her dreams. I worked tirelessly with her, day and night, until we finally bought a 2-bedroom apartment. Later, she decided the big city was too competitive and not suitable for living. So I moved back to our hometown with her, where we both secured government jobs. We sold the apartment in the big city and bought a 4-bedroom house in our hometown, leaving us with a 7-figure sum in savings. Before we got our marriage license, my mother-in-law made exorbitant demands for a hefty bride price and insisted we cover my father-in-law's expensive medical bills. I agreed to everything. Chung-Yu didn't have many connections, so my father, who used to work in a similar field, shamelessly begged his old friends for help, offering advice and guidance, which finally led to some minor achievements in her career after 2 years, managing a team of more than 10 people. In our daily lives, I always put her first. Because she had a sensitive stomach, I honed my cooking skills. Because she suffered from frozen shoulder, I specifically learned Yangzhou massage. I can say that I gave everything for Chung-Yu, freeing her from any worries. Since our son was born, I've cherished her even more. My sister-in-law is envious of my wife for having such a great husband. If Chung-Yu were to cheat, there would be no justice in the world. Besides, Chung-Yu isn't very passionate about intimacy. We only do it about once a week, so I thought cheating was impossible for her. I smiled and explained to my mother that Chung-Yu's workplace had recently implemented stricter regulations, requiring weekly on-duty shifts. As a low-level leader, it was normal for her to be stressed. My mother shook her head, sighed, and left with my grandson. Chung-Yu doesn't have a good relationship with my mother and often gives her the cold shoulder. However, I care too much about Chung-Yu, so my mother chooses to tolerate it. I know how difficult it is for my mother, so I always try to mediate their conflicts. I hope our family can live in harmony and happiness forever. Chung-Yu finished her shower and slept facing away from the door. Looking at her smooth back through her silk nightgown, I felt a surge of desire. I gently kissed her hair, my usual signal for intimacy. Since we hadn't been intimate for 2 weeks, I figured Chung-Yu wouldn't refuse. But she pushed me away impatiently, saying she was too tired and telling me to stop being so horny. I sat on the edge of the bed, forcing a smile, trying to convince myself that she was indeed too busy lately and needed a good rest. I took out my phone, planning a weekend family trip to Happy Valley. I started booking tickets and then checked my stocks and funds before getting ready to sleep. That's when my wife's phone, which was on her vanity, vibrated. I checked the time. It was late, and it was unlikely her workplace would send messages at this hour. I hesitated about whether to wake her. Just in case, I checked to see if it was an important work message, but I discovered the password was incorrect. I had never checked my wife's phone after we got married, but the password had always been her 6-digit birthday. Coupled with my mother's earlier comment, my heart sank. An extremely bad premonition washed over me. I tried to convince myself not to overthink it. reminding myself that the destruction of a relationship often starts with suspicion. Just as her phone was about to go dark, a WeChat message popped up. Yeah, my superiors spoke to me. I'm getting promoted to deputy section chief soon. My heart tightened, and a wave of numbness spread through my body. I turned to look at my sleeping wife, my breath catching in my throat. The ominous premonition intensified. My gut told me that the person sending the message was definitely a problem. Perhaps because I cared about my wife so much, I knew her habits and routines even better than she did. At this time, under normal circumstances, she wouldn't receive work messages. I desperately wanted to wake her up and ask what was going on, but I was also terrified. What if she confessed? Our son was only 3 years old. If I confirmed that she was cheating, my proudest achievement, my happy family, would fall apart. Besides, with just this one message, she wouldn't admit anything anyway. My heart was heavy as I quietly put down the phone and went to the study, only then realizing my back was drenched in cold sweat, and my hands and feet were ice cold. I kept telling myself that I was so good to her. Why would she throw away a good life? As a government employee, the consequences of an affair were severe. She couldn't possibly be unaware of the repercussions. But that WeChat message kept gnawing at my mind. My suspicion grew. What kind of relationship would lead someone to congratulate my wife on a promotion in the middle of the night? What kind of relationship would allow someone to call my wife? Yeah. Perhaps out of fear of losing her, I didn't dare to think further. But the seeds of doubt, once planted, could no longer be erased. I sat in the study all night and made a decision. I would secretly investigate the relationship between my wife and that person. If they were just normal colleagues, I would treat it as a misunderstanding and be even better to my wife in the future, even agreeing to buy my mother-in-law a small apartment for her retirement. But if their relationship was impure, what would I do? So, the most urgent task was to get my wife's phone password. I tossed and turned, unable to sleep all night. Early in the morning, I came out of the study. My wife had already left for work. Chapter 2. I had some milk and went to work. Sitting in my office, I couldn't focus, my mind replaying the message from last night. A voice inside screamed at me to unlock that damn phone and find out who sent it. I barely made it to the end of the day. Instead of going home, I went to my wife's workplace. We worked for sister companies, a well-known national research group with excellent benefits and over 100,000 employees. I didn't go in but waited outside. Her company finished work at 6, but she didn't come out. I suspected the sender worked there. If they were having an affair, they'd surely leave together. At 7:30, I saw her leave alone. I breathed a sigh of relief, telling myself I was being paranoid. I didn't approach her, but rushed home and pretended everything was normal, playing with our son. Soon after, my wife returned and went straight to the bathroom. The sound of running water made my heart race. My suspicions resurfaced. I had to get her phone password. I wouldn't rest until I knew the truth. While she showered, I searched online and found a method. She didn't go straight to bed but played with our son, leaving her phone to charge in the bedroom. I put some cornstarch on my fingers, then wiped it off and sent her a link, saying our son's birthday was coming up and there was a toy on Pinduoduo that needed one more click to get a discount. Unsuspecting, she grabbed her phone. The cornstarch prevented face unlock, so she turned and typed in her password. I watched and memorized it. Our son's birthday reversed. After waiting for her to fall asleep, I got up, took her phone, and went to the study. The rooms were separated by only a wall, but my heart pounded in my chest. I quickly entered the password and checked her messages. I scrolled through everything. Apart from work group chats, it was eerily clean. I told myself I was overreacting, that she wasn't that kind of person. But then I remembered her recent coldness towards me, her increasing impatience with intimacy, the harsh words she'd say even in front of my mother, the occasional sneers and sarcasm. I wasn't convinced. Due to the nature of her work, Chung Yuezi rarely deleted conversations completely. I realized she'd recently changed her password. I remembered a friend mentioning that deleted messages could be recovered with special software. I quickly searched online and followed the instructions. Throughout the recovery process, I kept glancing at the door, terrified she'd wake up. When it finished, I clicked open the results and immediately saw an unsaved contact. It was the same one who sent her the late-night message. My hands trembled as I opened the chat. I scanned the text, my mind going blank. The software claimed to recover data, but it was mostly gibberish. Still, I pieced together chilling clues from the legible parts. Like the message sent at 10 p.m. Come down and get me. I'm an XXXX. Like my wife complaining. Why do you take your shoes and socks off as soon as you enter the office? They haven't left yet. It's not a good look. Like her acting coy. I miss you. Why haven't you replied? The XXX content required payment. Cursing the profiteers, I paid. The following messages shattered me completely. I felt like someone was choking me, my heart filled with grief and rage. Baby, I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. It's okay, I've taken the pill. These two messages alone confirmed my worst fears. Was this the same cold woman who impatiently rejected my touch? She was having an affair, getting it on in the office, and taking the morning after pill for him. I felt like the world's biggest fool. Fighting back tears, I kept reading. Who do you like more, me or your husband? I'm disgusted by him. If it weren't for him being good to me and our child, I would have divorced him long ago. The sight of him makes me sick. Baby, did you have fun in the park last time? You're so bad. But I like it. I stared at the screen, eyes burning, unable to believe how little I meant to Chungyu. The rage intensified as I realized my devotion over the past decade had been wasted. Not only was she taking me for granted, she was plotting with her lover to frame me for infidelity, ruin my reputation, and take everything I owned. They even discussed how to torment my parents to death. I don't know how long I sat there, numb with grief. The weight of her betrayal crushed me. My near-obsessive love for her, the years of unwavering support, all for nothing. She wanted to destroy my family. How could I have been so blind to her venomous heart? She had me completely under her thumb. If her plan had worked, I would have been ruined. My parents, with their weak hearts, might not have survived. As the guilty party, I would have lost everything. Then she would have sailed off into the sunset with my money, living happily ever after. She wasn't cold. She was cold to me. She wasn't incapable of love. She just didn't love me. Knowing she was cheating, I felt a surge of rage, an urge to strangle her. But the thought of our 3-year-old son made my chest ache. Since meeting Chungyu, I had given her everything, believing myself the luckiest man alive. It turned out I was just a fool, pathetic. Despite the rage, the thought of divorce filled me with dread. I had loved her for so long, become accustomed to overlooking everything, even infidelity. A ridiculous thought even crossed my mind. Chapter 3. As long as everything was laid bare, and Chungyu was willing to break things off, return to the family, and live a good life, I would forgive the past. The thought flickered through my mind. I looked at the ashtray overflowing with cigarette butts, desperate to see who Chungyu's lover was, someone with such charm. First, I copied the other person's WeChat ID and searched through all of Chungyu's workgroups. Finally, I saw a name that perfectly matched the WeChat ID. Liu Jianxi, a name I had heard from Chungyu many times. He had taken the departmental exam with her and had helped her a lot at work. After I learned this, I even planned to thank him personally. Now that I think about it, the happy smile that overflowed from the corners of Chungyu's mouth when she mentioned Liu Jianxi clearly indicated they had been hooking up for a long time. I looked at the recovered messages again. The stimulating dialogue was like a needle, piercing my heart and leaving it bloody. I couldn't understand why Chungyu would cheat when we had a good life. Was I not good enough? Over the years, for Chungyu, I had given up so much. As fellow reserve cadres, my dad gave her his resources. To allow her to focus on her promotion, I took care of all the big and small things in our lives. To marry her, my mother-in-law demanded an exorbitant bride price, which became news in our area. My father-in-law suffered a cerebral hemorrhage and was in the ICU, and I covered all the medical expenses. Although my father-in-law died of organ failure 2 years ago, I had been good enough to Chungyu's family. My sister-in-law graduated from junior college and has a job that earns $8,000 or $9,000 a month. All thanks to the resources I shamelessly asked my old classmates for. I had done everything I could, and in the end, I was utterly defeated. Why? The computer screen went black. I looked at my reflection in the screen. At some point, tears had soaked my cheeks, my face twisted with pain and jealousy. Unable to control my inner rage any longer, I went to the master bedroom and woke up the sleeping Chungyu. Chungyu usually doesn't sleep well, so she's very grumpy when she wakes up. I'm always afraid of waking her, so I tiptoe to the bathroom, but this time, My rough movements filled her face with anger, and she raised her hand and slapped me. I told you I'm very tired. Don't always think about such dirty things. Your head is full of them. Are you useless? Chung-yu glared at me with a look of contempt, thinking I was seeking intimacy, so she was very impatient. I stared into Chung-yu's eyes and said hoarsely, Lu Jianxi, don't you have anything to explain? Chung-yu froze, a flicker of panic in her eyes, but quickly regained her composure. She frowned and said, I don't know what you're talking about. I took out my phone and gritted my teeth. I know everything. Chung-yu's face changed and she lunged forward to grab my phone, but I pushed her away. I couldn't possibly give her the evidence back. I underestimated Chung-yu's shamelessness. Before I could question her, she screamed, You Fong Yu, you actually peeked at my phone. I can't believe you're this kind of person. I've been blind all these years to marry you. Don't you know the meaning of respect? I was wrong about you. Faced with Chung-yu's turning the tables, I was dumbfounded. Don't you have anything to explain? I repeated the same sentence, my eyes fixed on Chung-yu's, as if trying to see through her innermost thoughts. Actually, filing for divorce was simple, but thinking about the past 10 years of devotion and our 3-year-old son in the next room, I could hardly breathe. I didn't want to destroy the happy home we had worked so hard to build. As long as Chung-yu admitted her mistake and promised to live a good life in the future, I could forgive her. But I ultimately overestimated my importance in Chung-yu's heart. Not only did she not give me a good look, but she also slapped me again and said angrily, Lu Jianxi and I are superiors and subordinates. I know I haven't wronged you, but I didn't expect you to have such dirty thoughts. Dirty people have dirty minds. Get out. I don't want to see you. Chung-yu was aggressive, showing no sign of remorse. My heart sank. Why was Chung-yu still so arrogant? Was it because of my unconditional tolerance in the past? She seemed to have me completely under her thumb. I was like a kite in her hand, a puppet on a string. She could control my emotions at any time, making my life a living hell. She was probably relying on the deleted chat records, assuming I couldn't find any evidence. So she took the initiative. As expected of a minor leader, she knew quite a few tricks. I suppressed the urge to retaliate and decided to give her one last chance. I said hoarsely, I recovered the WeChat chat you deleted. I read it all. Chung-yu's face changed, and her eyes widened. She fell silent. A glimmer of hope rose in my heart again. If Chung-yu repented and returned to the family for our son's sake, there was still room for discussion. But Chung-yu quickly raised her head and said in a tone I had never heard before, coldly, Since you already know, why are you still asking me? Yes, I did cheat. Being with you is too suffocating. You're a useless good-for-nothing. I don't want to live a life without power or influence. If you want to maintain this marriage, wouldn't it be better to be blind? Chung-yu fiddled with the hair in front of her eyes, looking down at me, no longer hiding her disdain and contempt. I heard her words, and my head exploded. I couldn't believe that this was the consciousness of someone who had attended a key university and even submitted an application to join the party. Her distorted worldview overturned everything I knew about her. I have to go to work tomorrow. Don't bother me, she said, pulling the covers over herself, seemingly treating me as if I were air. I sat on the edge of the bed, numb all over, unable to accept the attitude Chung-yu gave me after her affair was exposed. Watching Chung-yu fall asleep peacefully, my eyes gradually reddened, and a crazy thought surged in my heart. If I pounced on her, I could quickly strangle her and die together. But ultimately, I didn't dare, and I didn't want to. Like a complete failure, I walked out of the room dejectedly and sat in the living room all night. The next morning, Chung-yu came out of the room, looking refreshed and dressed up. She deliberately avoided looking at me and walked straight to the door. She seemed certain that I loved her and wouldn't or dared not divorce her. My mother came out of the kitchen holding my grandson and complained that my grandson had a cold and that his mother should care about him. Chung-yu was naturally unhappy and started arguing with my mother. Perhaps because of my concession last night, Chung-yu no longer needed to hold back. In her anger, she slapped my mother and cursed, Your whole family is useless. You can't do anything right. Marrying into your family was the worst luck of my 8 lifetimes. Chapter 4. My mom covered her cheek, staring blankly at Chung-yu. Although they argued sometimes, my mom was usually the first to back down. Chung-yu, no matter how rude, had never resorted to violence. Now, she had actually slapped my mom's face. Ignoring her crying son, Chung-yu glared at me and snapped. "Control your mother. Stop her incessant yapping. It's so annoying." Her arrogant, heartless demeanor completely shattered the last shred of love I had for her. She could trample on my dignity, taking advantage of my affection for her, but she absolutely could not hurt my mother. In that instant, my heart died. I couldn't hear Chung-yu's taunts anymore. Only one thought consumed me. Why is this bitch doing this to me? Since you have no shame, don't blame me for being ruthless. My mom was holding our son and crying. Chung-yu continued to rant, showing no remorse and even mocking me. I walked up to her, raised my hand, and slapped her to the floor. I couldn't take it anymore. It was a powerful slap, fueled by years of pent-up anger. As my hand connected, rage clouded my mind. I thought about how good I had been to Chung-yu over the past decade, but she not only failed to appreciate it, but also dared to hit my mother. In that moment, my love for her vanished, replaced by a burning hatred that demanded release. I felt like I would be consumed by the flames of my fury. Chung-yu lay beside the shoe cabinet. Seeing the rage in my eyes, a flicker of fear crossed her face. I had been like a dog to her, completely under her thumb. Whatever she said, I obeyed. She probably never imagined I would hit her. My mother's shocked expression told me I was in a dangerous state, on the verge of a breakdown. After a while, Chung-yu regained her composure. She lunged at me, clawing and screaming. "Fong-yu, you dare hit me? You useless piece of trash. You dare hit me. Go to hell." I had spoiled her so much that she still hadn't grasped the gravity of the situation. She was still trying her usual manipulative tactics. After the first slap, my anger subsided slightly, and a sliver of rationality returned. Looking at the red mark on Chung-yu's face, I felt a pang of regret. But then her words reignited my fury. "You're a useless waste of space. You're not even fit to lick Liu Jianxi's toes." Chung-yu roared, her face contorted in rage. I knew she had a bad temper and could say incredibly hurtful things when angry, but she usually kept it under wraps in public, maintaining a facade of a virtuous wife and mother. Deep down, she was impulsive. I just hadn't expected her, in her rage, to utter such cruel, piercing words. They felt like a knife twisting in my heart. I lost control. I slapped her again and then kicked her hard to the floor. The love I once felt for her was now matched by an equal measure of hate. Anger had robbed me of reason. I had become a demon. I grabbed Chung-yu's hair and dragged her into the bedroom, her eyes finally registering fear. I slapped her twice more and roared. "Have you lost your conscience? You cheating bitch! How can you be so brazen? Are you tired of living?" I grabbed a fruit knife and pressed it against her neck, silencing her hysterics. "I'm going to kill you." Chung-yu was terrified. She had never seen me like this, so consumed by rage. She seemed to realize that one more word could be her last. I wanted to kill her, then go to her workplace and kill Liu, even if it meant mutual destruction. Just as I was losing all control, a knock on the door and my son's cries snapped me back to reality. A sliver of sanity returned. I stared blankly at Chung-yu, a chill running down my spine. If I hadn't regained control, I might have killed her, and then I would be facing death myself. My life would be over. My death wouldn't matter. But what about my 7-year-old parents and my 3-year-old son? How could I inflict such pain on my parents? And if I killed Chung-yu, wouldn't I be doing Liu a favor? He would be free to continue seducing other women and wreaking havoc. After the peak of my rage, I started to think strategically. The mask was off. There was no point pretending there was any love left. For over a decade, my unwavering devotion had only earned me Chung-yu's disdain and escalating abuse. I'd had enough. Since Chung-yu had changed her heart, she couldn't blame me for being ruthless. To get revenge on this adulterous couple, I needed a targeted approach. They were civil servants on the rise in their careers. Liu was about to be promoted, wasn't he? I would ruin him first. My immediate priorities were to gather evidence and protect my assets. We hadn't signed a prenuptial agreement, so even though she was the guilty party, she wouldn't walk away empty-handed in a divorce. Fortunately, after I passed the civil service exam, I had open stock accounts and investments in my parents' names to avoid complications. That was the bulk of our assets. Chung-yu had admitted to the affair in the living room. but I hadn't recorded it, so the chat logs weren't enough evidence. I needed a recording, but Chungyu wasn't stupid. When I pointed the phone camera at her, she remained silent, even when I brandished the fruit knife. She knew that a confession could ruin her. Chungyu bit her lip, tears silently streaming down her face. Fangyu, please don't ask anymore. Can't we just live a good life? I was wrong. I'm sorry. I scoffed inwardly. This kind of person didn't know the meaning of remorse. I bet the moment she left this house, she would call the police and accuse me of domestic violence. I knew her too well. I had to nail down proof of her affair as soon as possible. After several failed attempts, Chungyu's stubborn silence was infuriating. Just as I was at my wit's end, a message from Lu popped up on her phone. I knew this was my chance. Lu's message read, "I fell asleep last night. Did you miss me, baby?" Seeing his message made my blood boil. This bastard loved seducing other men's wives, didn't he? I would destroy him. I wished I could crawl through the internet and stab him. "Look, your baby is online," I sneered, waving the phone at Chungyu. Despite her attempts to stay composed, Chungyu panicked. She scrambled to her feet and tried to grab the phone. I kicked her back down, and she landed on her knees, eyes red-rimmed, begging, "Please don't ask anymore. I was wrong, okay? Let's just live a good life." Rage surged through me. Now she wanted a good life? When she was with Lu, did she ever think about her husband? Why eat shit when you have perfectly good rice? Chapter 5. My hatred for Chungyu surpassed anyone at that moment. All I could think about was revenge, destroying this adulterous couple, and making sure none of us had any peace. Fighting back nausea, I sent a message to Lu. "You ignored me last night. I'm angry." After a few vague exchanges, I couldn't hold back and went straight to the point. "I'm on my period these few days, and I'm feeling a bit. Can you chat with me?" This message was like a fly landing in shit for Lu. I could feel his excitement through the screen. I continued to lead him on, saying things that almost made me vomit, like, "Do you even remember where we had our first date? You were so bad." Lu, oblivious to the unusual situation, chatted enthusiastically, occasionally adding, "Baby, I miss you." I couldn't believe that Chungyu, with her higher education, would hook up with such a vulgar man. Or perhaps women present one face, but desire something completely different. I read every one of Lu's replies to Chungyu. Seeing her pale face didn't bring me any satisfaction, only endless anger and sorrow. Chungyu covered her ears several times, trying not to listen, and even attempted to rush out of the room, but I dragged her back and gave her a good beating. I wasn't feeling any tenderness now. All I wanted was to destroy them. Perhaps realizing she couldn't escape, Chungyu collapsed on the floor, covering her face and crying. With a grim face, I continued to extract information. After a nauseating half hour, I finally understood the whole story of their affair, and a raging fury surged within me, threatening to consume me. They'd been together for almost 2 years. Lu had only been married a short time. He was Chungyu's direct superior. They had worked together since their entry-level days, climbing the ladder step by step from the production line to the office. Lu had become a director, and Chungyu a stock-level administrative cadre in logistics. It was said she was likely to be promoted to director within the year. Chungyu's rise had been meteoric. Because of her proactive work ethic, she had organized the often chaotic entry-level documentation impeccably. She had also seized another opportunity, a speech contest everyone else had refused to participate in, which was then forcibly assigned to her. Coincidentally, my father had been in charge of the unit's party propaganda before his retirement. He had packaged countless individuals with this kind of sentimental stuff. The old man worked busily all night, producing a well-formatted, touching speech. It covered everything from missing her hometown while living in the big city to choosing her career despite being a mother. The leaders in the audience applauded. They thought they had found a gem, diligent and eloquent. Thus, Chungyu's career path opened up, and Lu slowly extended his dirty hands. I thought about how much my father had helped Chungyu in her career, and how she repaid us. In Chungyu's eyes, was I not even worth a toe of Lu's? I almost wanted to laugh. Knowing the whole story of their affair, the next step was to record it. But Chungyu wasn't stupid. No matter how I threatened or coaxed her, she started playing the guilt card, saying things like, "I'm so ashamed, don't ask anymore, do you want to drive me to death?" and other such nonsense. She refused to deny or admit anything. This drove me crazy. Lu, seeing that I hadn't replied for a long time, became impatient, asking when we could meet. I nearly had a stroke when I saw that. I hadn't realized how different Chungyu acted with Lu compared to with me. Unable to control my rage any longer, I roared at Chungyu. Why? From high school to university, entering society, getting into this unit, in everything I put you first, thought of you in every way, handed over my entire salary. With just the unit salary, could you have lived such a good life? Everyone says you must have accumulated good karma in your past life to have married such a good husband. I've done everything I can. Why are you shitting on the whole family? The more I spoke, the more aggrieved I felt. Gritting my teeth, I initiated a video call with Lu. Lu answered almost instantly, probably thinking that only Chungyu was home and wondering where it would be convenient to meet. But when he saw me, his expression was Oscar-worthy. I'll probably never forget his expression. Pupils dilated, petrified in front of the camera, utterly comical. Seeing his face made me even more furious. What the hell was this thing? My wife chose him over me? Middle-aged, obese, half-bald, his appearance was miles behind mine. Although I was over 35, I regularly jogged and kept in good shape. Coupled with my 6-foot height and positive attitude, I looked like a young guy. I often get hit on by girls on the street. What the hell was wrong with me? Filled with intense resentment, I didn't need a mirror to know how terrifying my face must have been. I said chillingly, "Congratulations, Lu. I heard you're getting promoted to deputy director. But that might not happen tomorrow. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm your lover's husband." I grabbed Chingyu's hair and pulled her in front of the camera. "Take a look." I sneered. "He's the one who's going to marry you." Chungyu was like a puddle of mud, slumped on the ground, covering her face in shame. Staring at the awkward, silent old man on the screen, I licked my lips and gritted my teeth. Stealing someone's wife is like killing their parents, Lu. I'm telling you now, from today onwards we're going to play a game. I'll stake my life on destroying you. Lu, probably terrified, quickly ended the call. Panting, I surveyed the messy bedroom. It bore the traces of my life with Chungyu. Our son's diapers were by the bed, and our wedding photo hung on the wall, our happy smiles now a cruel mockery. I once thought I was the happiest man in the world. Now I realized I was the biggest fool. "Say something," I yelled at Chungyu, but she just kept shaking her head, pleading and crying. In the past, I might have softened, but now I wanted to kill her. For a man so ugly, so pathetic, she abandoned her family. It made me feel even more ridiculous, more pathetic. Chungyu's phone received another message from Lu, and it made me want to laugh. The first thing that bastard said was, "Dude, we're all adults, it's consensual, don't take it so seriously." I cursed back, "Let me play with your wife for 2 years, and then we'll talk." Lu sighed and tried to reason with me. "Look, since it's already happened, let's not make things too ugly." Chapter 6. "Okay, how can you calm down?" I blurted out. "I want you to die." Perhaps sensing that I was impossible to reason with, the man surnamed Lu gradually revealed his true nature, arrogantly saying, "You're supposed to be a man. If you can't control your own wife, don't blame others. And don't be like a child, constantly saying you'll kill me. The key is to solve the problem when it arises. Just say what you want." I was so angry at these words that I almost smashed my phone. If this dog had said he truly loved Chungyu and would never give up no matter what, I might have even respected him as a man. But he clearly wanted to cut ties with Chungyu and shirk responsibility. It was obvious he was no good. The man surnamed Lu even threatened that his connections were strong, telling me not to blow things out of proportion, or I would regret it. Then he also said Chungyu was too conservative, just SOSO compared to other women he had been with. Since I wanted her, he would give her back. My head was buzzing. I ignored his interests and instead sent the messages directly to Chungyu, roaring, "See that? This is your precious darling. He sees you as a tool for release." Chungyu's pupils dilated. She stared fixedly at the screen and covered her face, bursting into tears. "No to cry now? What were you doing earlier?" At this point, I had completely lost hope in Chungyu. Being with her felt dirty. I said coldly, "Saying anything now is useless. I'll give you a few choices. Right now, revenge was the only thing on my mind. I just wanted to kill that dog couple as soon as possible." The arrogance of the man surnamed Lu had severely provoked me. Thinking about all these years, my heartfelt devotion, almost self-destructive efforts to cater to Chungyu, only to end up being labeled with a massive green hat. That man surnamed Liu looked like a hoodlum, no different from a street gangster. Yet in Chung-Yu's eyes, I couldn't even compare to his toe. This was a heavy blow to my self-esteem. No man could tolerate it. If you had found someone tall, handsome, and powerful, I might have even thought highly of Chung-Yu. Now it seems I was blind to have chosen this filthy thing as my wife. I stared at the dispirited Chung-Yu. She no longer had her previous arrogance. Her face was filled with fear and helplessness. Knowing regret now, playing so wildly in the office with that wild man, you probably didn't expect him to be a complete scumbag. I slapped Chung-Yu's face and growled out my demands. First, you leave with nothing but the clothes on your back. You are not allowed to take anything else except your luggage. Second, I want both of your reputations ruined. For the rest of your life, you will face men's malicious gazes and women's judging fingers. Your whole families can forget about ever holding your heads high again. Third, I want your reputations and I want your futures. I will go to your workplace. I will let your leaders and colleagues see the good deeds you've done. Don't even think about advancing in your career ever again. Finally, as long as I'm alive, if you two are doing well, I won't be. I used to love Chung-Yu so much, but now I've lost so miserably, so I will destroy them. At first, Chung-Yu didn't react much to the first two demands. But when she heard that I was going to make a scene at her workplace, her face changed drastically. She crawled over and knelt in front of me, clutching my pants leg, begging in panic, "Please don't do this. If you make trouble at his workplace, he'll be completely finished." Looking at Chung-Yu like this, my blood froze. It felt like I was nailed to a pillar of shame. An indescribable humiliation spread throughout my body, and I kicked her to the ground in anger. If Chung-Yu didn't know the true face of the man surnamed Liu and was still speaking up for him, I could understand it. After all, they were playing so passionately. Maybe she had developed real feelings. But now that she knew that the man surnamed Liu had other women outside, Chung-Yu not only didn't regret it, but was still thinking about him. I felt as sick as if I had eaten shit, my head buzzing, so angry I couldn't speak. I grabbed Chung-Yu's head and slammed it against the cabinet, my eyes terrifyingly red, roaring. "Are you even listening to yourself? You're still protecting that beast, you slut." I lost my mind, pressing Chung-Yu against the cabinet, and picked up a fruit knife, about to stab it down. It would be best if we all just died. Let's all perish together. Chung-Yu looked at me in horror, not daring to move, even closing her eyes, prepared to die. Just as the knife was about to plunge down, my mother's calls and my son's cries came from outside again, pulling me back to reality. I looked at the fruit knife that almost pierced her heart, and cold sweat broke out all over my body. Just a little bit more, and I would have made a terrible mistake. When I picked up the knife earlier, I had thought it wasn't worth it, but Chung-Yu's fall from grace made me lose my mind again. My mother's anxious voice sounded from outside, chiding me not to be impulsive and to talk things out calmly. I took a deep breath, put away the fruit knife, and collapsed to the ground, panting heavily. Remembering all the grievances I had suffered over the years, I couldn't help but cover my face and cry. I truly cared about this family. In the past, when I saw news about couples abandoning each other when disaster struck, I thought those people were not real men, didn't love their wives at all. If it were me, I would protect her even if it meant dying myself. I am a man willing to use my life to protect my parents and wife. Although I am usually not ambitious, I can say I have a clear conscience. I usually do good deeds and accumulate blessings for my family. I thought heaven would look after me. Even if it didn't give me great wealth and fortune, at least it would give me peace and safety. Now I understand, kind people are bullied and good horses are ridden. I deserve it. From Chung-Yu's reaction, I have completely given up on her. Aren't you afraid of me making a scene at your workplace? I will go and make a big scene. Let the whole world know about your affair. Let them be pointed at wherever they go, never able to hold their heads high, living in shame. I took Chung-Yu's phone, glared at her fiercely, and then walked out of the bedroom. When my mother saw me come out, she hurriedly looked towards the room, and after confirming that Chung-Yu was okay, she breathed a sigh of relief and quickly handed me my son. My son had been crying and calling for his mother. I picked up my son, pinched his little face, and couldn't help but burst into tears. I had already decided to divorce Chung-Yu and send her to the 18th level of hell, never to be able to turn over again. But seeing my son's innocent face, my heart ached again. In a marital crisis, the most suffering is often the innocent child. The reason I didn't make a big mistake and spared Chung-Yu's life was because my son was my biggest weakness. Fortunately, my son is very obedient. After a little coaxing, he stopped crying and started laughing while playing with his new toy. Chapter 7. I went to the study and used Chung-Yu's phone to contact a female colleague I wasn't very close with. I got straight to the point and asked for information about a man surnamed Liu, including his department, position, and his wife's workplace. The colleague answered readily at first, but then sensed something was wrong and asked tentatively, "Are you okay?" Of course, I was okay. It was Chung-Yu and that Liu guy who were going to have problems. They didn't want me to make a fuss, did they? Well, I was going to make a huge one. A soul filled with hatred is a new soul. My mind was consumed with thoughts of revenge against that cheating couple. But this is a society ruled by law, and I'm just an ordinary person. I couldn't go on a bloody rampage like Wu's song. Even if I succeeded in getting revenge, the consequences would be devastating. I couldn't accept that my family, once the envy of others, would become a laughingstock overnight. I couldn't accept that Chung-Yu, whom I had cherished, had fallen for a scumbag. Liu's true nature had been exposed, and any normal woman would have kept her distance. But Chung-Yu was infatuated, even willing to divorce me to protect him. My life felt like a joke. I had poured my heart and soul into Chung-Yu's family, only to be smeared with filth and cuckolded. While I was in the study, my sister-in-law, Ching Shui, called on video. I assumed she knew about her sister's affair and wanted to apologize, so I instinctively wanted to ask her if I hadn't been good to their family all these years. But after answering the call, seeing her nonchalant expression, I felt a surge of anger. Chung Shui was actually prettier than her sister. Perhaps because she hadn't experienced the hardships Chung-Yu had, she dressed casually, changed boyfriends frequently, and was a typical rebellious girl. She had been living off her parents due to her low education and laziness. Chung-Yu had begged me to find her a job. I pulled strings and nearly exhausted all my connections to find a position that met Ching Shui's expectations. A receptionist at a foreign trade company, requiring no special skills and offering decent pay. Chung Shui finally settled down after starting the job, but her romantic life became even more chaotic. She often made unreasonable demands, taking advantage of my doting on Chung-Yu. "Brother-in-law, I've got my eye on a bag, but I'm a bit short on cash. Can you lend me some?" she said with a grin. Expressionless, I asked, "How much?" "It's a limited edition, and I've been waiting for it for a long time. I only have 1,000, and I need another 39,000, she replied quickly. I almost cursed her shamelessness. A $40,000 bag, and she wanted to borrow 39,000. I hadn't kept a close count, but I had lent her at least 80, if not 100,000, before. They treated me like a cash cow. In the past, I would have considered it, as she was Chung-Yu's sister and could usually put in a good word for me. But now, looking at the two sisters, I felt only disgust. So I flatly refused, my tone harsh. I just wanted to hang up the video and prepare to destroy her sister. Seeing that I wouldn't lend her the money, Chung Shui's tone became sharp. "Brother-in-law, you're getting cocky now, aren't you? I helped you a lot when you and my sister fought. Now you're burning bridges. Just see if I help you in the future." This blatant threat fueled my rage. "Don't think I need your money. I was just giving you a chance to curry favor with me. If my sister gets angry, you won't be able to bear the consequences." Chung Shui was still trying to use Chung-Yu to force my hand. I hung up the video and sent her the conversation revealing Chung-Yu's affair. "Look at what your sister has done. I can't bear the consequences. I've wasted years supporting your family." Chung Shui was momentarily stunned after seeing the screenshots, but her next words broke me. "Even if my sister is cheating, it's because you're incompetent. If you were good to her, would she cheat? You need to think about your own problems." Her twisted logic shattered my worldview. How had I not noticed this before? Now I only felt disgusted. I ignored her string of voice messages, probably filled with the same bullshit about how I wasn't blameless. Now, I would begin my revenge against Chung-Yu and Liu. I posted on Chung-Yu's WeChat moments that I was out of town with my phone off, providing a contact number for emergencies. Then I started composing a message with pictures and text, opened all of Chung-Yu's work groups, and hit send. For revenge, I abandoned all sense of decency. Besides the work groups, I even sent a message to all the leaders at her company, including the highest-ranking one. If I was going to make trouble, I was going to make it big. After sending the message, I knew there was no turning back. I turned off my phone and walked out of the study. I saw Chung-Yu hugging our son, repeatedly saying, "Mommy's sorry, mommy's so sorry," and other such nonsense. My anger flared again. I knew she was apologizing to me, but remembering how she had protected Liu even after seeing his true colors, I lost control and kicked her to the floor, gritting my teeth. "We had a good life, and you became someone's mistress. You have the nerve to apologize? You deserve to go to hell." Chung-Yu's face turned pale. She bit her lip, offered no resistance, and just cried silently. My mother rushed over and pushed me, scolding, "What do you think you're doing? She's still Guibao's mother. Apologize immediately." Then, she went to comfort Chung-Yu. Although my mother was angry about Chung-Yu's affair, she held the old-fashioned belief that even the most heinous sins could be tolerated for the sake of a complete family. Her heart was broken, but her intentions were good. Unfortunately, my heart was already dead. The sight of Chung-Yu disgusted me. Decades of devotion had gone to the dogs. I wanted to tear her to pieces. The only reason I spared her wretched life was for my parents and son. I picked up my son and tried to comfort him for a long time, but he kept crying for his mother. I had to admit, even though Chung-Yu rarely spent time with him, he was closer to her. I finally managed to stop his crying with an Ultraman toy, and he soon fell asleep. I handed my son to my mother and collapsed on the floor, feeling dizzy and breathless. The intense anger had kept me on edge, nearly leading to disaster. Now that I had relaxed, the exhaustion drained me completely. Gasping for air, I crawled back to the study and, unable to hold back any longer, buried my face in my hands and wept. Chapter 8. Even when I broke my leg in a car accident and convulsed in pain, I gritted my teeth and didn't shed a single tear. But now, the tears wouldn't stop. I just wanted to cry my heart out. I was in so much pain. Whose wife cheats on them, and they remain as calm as I have been? I don't know how long I cried, but my entire sleeve was soaked. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, and I was listless, like a different person. I hadn't relaxed since I found out about Chung-Yu's affair. My chest was filled with rage. I'd already sent the message to Chung-Yu's workgroup chat. I didn't care what the consequences would be. I had staked my reputation on making their lives hell. When I finally calmed down, I realized it was dark outside. I hadn't eaten all day, but I wasn't hungry. My son's laughter drifted in from the living room, where he was watching cartoons. I sighed. Even though I'd been cheated on, life had to go on. I'm not some high-ranking official, just a low-level civil servant. Now, I was starting to regret my actions. In my rage, I'd sent out the messages of Chung-Yu and that Liu guy's affair, not intending to save the marriage. But my parents cared about their reputation. How could they face the neighbors and colleagues after such a scandal? They'd held their heads high their entire lives. And what about my son's future? He would be ostracized, but there was no going back. I'd sent the messages, so now I'd see what kind of retribution that adulterous couple would face. I had a feeling things weren't so simple. Judging by Liu's arrogance, he must have seduced many other married women. But so far, he hadn't faced any repercussions. Instead, his career was flourishing. Whatever. I'd take it one step at a time. If I was going to go after them, I needed to be prepared for a long fight. I didn't care about my career anymore. I was going all the way. I walked out of the study and saw my dad was home. Yesterday, he said he was going on a trip with his old army buddies, but my mom called him back, probably because she knew about Chung-Yu's affair. My dad looked at me, wanting to say something, but stopping himself. He was worried about me, of course. I forced a smile and shook my head. Then I glanced at the bedroom. Chung-Yu was still inside, hadn't come out at all, playing dead. I saw a tray by the door with a bowl of porridge on it. My face darkened, and I kicked the tray away. Before I could explode, the sound of a key turning in the lock echoed from the front door. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law walked in. Seeing them, I felt a surge of anger. They looked exhausted from their journey, and their first words ignited the powder keg. "Fang Yu, can't you just give Chung-Yu a break? Do you have to completely destroy her to be satisfied?" My mother-in-law pointed at me and started scolding as soon as she entered. I was stunned for a moment before I could react. I thought they had come to apologize for Chung-Yu. As the saying goes, it's better to demolish a temple than to ruin a marriage. But their attitude clearly wasn't apologetic. Of course not. How could my mother-in-law ever be wrong? Their whole family was never wrong. Only I could be wrong. I had already experienced their family's behavior when I was dating Chung-yu, but back then I loved her, so I was very tolerant. From the exorbitant betrothal gifts my mother-in-law demanded to my father-in-law's hefty medical bills, to my sister-in-law's job, even down to their broken microwave, I paid for everything. They took advantage of my love for Chung-yu, treating me like an ATM, and never showed me any respect. My mother-in-law, especially, was never satisfied with me, always finding fault. It was probably because back in high school, a rich kid wanted to pursue Chung-yu, but he was just playing around. Did they really think he would marry her? But my mother-in-law, from who knows where, heard that I had somehow sabotaged their chance to marry into wealth. So, after we got married, she made things difficult for me. I only told my parents the good things, hiding the bad, worried they wouldn't approve of me marrying into such a family. I constantly sang their praises. But what did I get in return? My mother-in-law barged in and immediately started accusing me of trying to ruin Chung-yu's life. My sister-in-law was even worse, saying Chung-yu had only made a mistake that any woman could make, and shouldn't I reflect on my own shortcomings? My mother-in-law was a rural woman with little education, so I could understand her crude language. But my sister-in-law had at least gone to college and worked for a few years. Didn't she even understand basic decency? Looking at the two faces in front of me, their arguments becoming increasingly absurd, I suddenly realized I had been too good to them. Now that I didn't love Chung-yu, they were nothing to me. I finally understood why Chung-yu felt no guilt after cheating. Damn, birds of a feather flock together. Like mother, like daughter. My mother-in-law still didn't realize who was wrong. She would always side with her family, regardless of the truth. She kept spouting her twisted logic, as if Chung-yu's affair was my fault, that I wasn't gentle enough, that I didn't spend enough money on her, and that if a man was good enough, his wife wouldn't cheat. If she weren't an elder, I would have slapped her across the face. Before I could retort, my mother couldn't stand it anymore and stood up to argue with my mother-in-law. My mom usually had a good temper. Even when Chung-yu angered her to no end, she wouldn't say a harsh word, enduring it all for the sake of family harmony. But now, her temper flared, and she argued with my mother-in-law until their faces were red. The two old ladies, who usually had their differences, nearly turned the living room upside down. My dad pulled my mom back, and my sister-in-law dragged her mother away, finally managing to quell the fight. But my mother-in-law wouldn't let it go, yelling at me, "See? The whole family is bullying me. My daughter marrying into your family was a curse. No wonder she cheated. No woman could stand your family." My mom was furious, clutching her chest, unable to speak. She had coronary heart disease and couldn't handle stress. She had just gone to the hospital for a checkup recently, and now, with such a huge incident at home and being provoked by my mother-in-law, she was showing signs of a heart attack. My dad quickly took her to her room to prevent her condition from worsening. "Shut up." I finally lost control, staring at my mother-in-law's disgusting face. I gritted my teeth and said, "I just want to ask two things. First, was what your daughter did right or wrong? Should she have done it? Second, that man had just gotten married when he started hooking up with your daughter. Didn't your daughter know he was married when she attended his wedding? Even if I admit to 100 faults, even the law would judge your daughter as guilty of adultery. His wife doesn't know your daughter. They have no grievances. What did she do wrong?" Chapter 9. Your daughter is destroying someone else's family. Where's the sense in that? If you have something to say, say it. If it's unbearable, get a divorce. How has this become something justifiable? I yelled with all my might. I never raised my voice to my mother-in-law before. Basic decency prevented me. But my mother-in-law's family was pushing it too far, almost causing my own mother to have a heart attack. No matter how tolerant I am, I couldn't bottle it up anymore. My mother-in-law seemed taken aback by my outburst, her face embarrassed and awkward, unsure of how to respond. If she had any shame, she wouldn't be able to refute my words. Seeing that she couldn't argue with me, she snorted and went to her daughter's room with her sister. Not long after they went in, wailing cries erupted from the room. My mother-in-law rushed out and tried to hit me, raging, "Has your conscience been eaten by a dog? You hit her so hard. My daughter bore children for your family. Even if she had no merit, she suffered. You should die." Her sister followed, threatening to call the police, saying domestic violence has legal consequences. I sneered inwardly. watching their unreasonable tantrum without reacting. Now they know to talk about feelings and the law. Damn it, they didn't mention a word about Chung Yu's affair. Truly shameless. Perhaps they'd carried on long enough, seeing I had no intention of backing down and seemed ready to go all the way with Chung Yu. My mother-in-law and her sister started to panic. Their attitude softened, and they told me about the messages I'd sent in the work group chat, causing a big commotion. That night, my mother-in-law and her sister stayed, watching over Chung Yu, probably afraid I'd snap and kill someone. My mother took some medicine, temporarily suppressing her condition. Worried that my mother-in-law would provoke her again, I asked my parents to take my son away for a few days. After repeatedly assuring them I wouldn't kill anyone, my worried parents left. I returned to my study, silent. I'd said everything I needed to say during the day. Now that the surroundings were quiet, I felt suffocated, as if invisible hands were squeezing my neck. Looking at the wedding photo on my desk, Chung Yu and I were smiling happily. For the first 2 years of our marriage, we were actually very happy. Chung Yu was grateful that I overcame all obstacles and unconditionally met her mother's demands. She was so touched at the time, saying she would treat me well for the rest of her life. Any other man, hearing about the exorbitant dowry and having to pay hundreds of thousands in medical expenses for his father-in-law, probably wouldn't have had the courage to continue. But I loved Chung Yu too much, and despite my parents' objections, I insisted on marrying her. As the saying goes, if you don't listen to the elders, you'll suffer the consequences. Now, facing the repercussions, I deserve it. But I was certain Chung Yu loved me back in school. Every weekend, we liked to go to the park next to the school, lie on the grass, look at the blue sky, snuggle together, and dream of a beautiful future. Chung Yu gave me everything. Every birthday wish she made was to love each other forever and never be apart. I swore to treat her well for the rest of my life. I don't know when it started, but Chung Yu seemed to change. Probably around the time she hooked up with that Liu guy. She became unreasonable, often losing her temper at me. Especially during our trip to Vietnam. She not only wouldn't let me touch her, but also showed disgust and impatience. Yet she was all smiles when she was on her phone. I thought she was stressed from work at the time and didn't think about infidelity. She was probably already with him then. A woman's infidelity is not as simple as seeking physical stimulation. For someone as conservative as Chung Yu to take this step for so long, she must have considered the consequences and price of being discovered. That means she was a moth genuinely throwing herself into the fire. In her eyes, it wasn't fire, but light. What's hardest for me to accept is that the person Chung Yu cheated with is so pathetic. I thought of the saying, nice guys finish last. It's probably true, but should honest people have to endure everything? The study light was off. Only the cigarette between my fingers glowed, reflecting my haggard face in the mirror. The oppressive darkness enveloped me. My body trembled again, and hatred surged within me. I'd considered using the evidence in my hands to threaten those 2 dogs. Chung Yu would probably be obedient for a short time, but who could guarantee she'd stay that way? The reason Wu Dalong was silenced by Shimin Qing wasn't because Shimin Qing wanted to kill him, but because Wu Dalong threatened to tell Wu Song and seek revenge. Once a spouse has a change of heart, no one's home is safe. What if they conspire to kill me? Lu said we could talk. It was nothing more than an exchange of interests and money. I had a promising future. My boss had even talked about promoting me, but the location was a bit far. At the time, I was worried it would affect our relationship, so I refused. Thinking back now, I was so stupid. Chung Yu strived to improve herself, and I stayed put, ultimately becoming the unambitious one. And if I accepted Lu's conditions, swallowed my pride, and received compensation, I would never be able to hold my head high for the rest of my life, never able to stand tall. As for revenge, it was all impulsive, done in the heat of the moment. I spent the night in this half-asleep state. I was in a state of mental breakdown, sometimes dreaming of killing them both, sometimes dreaming of the time Chung Yu and I spent together in school. In movies and TV shows, the protagonists often cut off their own arms or legs for survival. It's not that easy. Even fingers are connected to the heart, let alone limbs. And now I have to tear down the family I've worked so hard to maintain, to take revenge on a wife I've been with for over a decade. Forget about actually doing it. Even coming up with a plan, even a beginning, is incredibly difficult. I woke up around 6 in the morning, feeling a heavy weight on my chest suffocating me. I let out a yell. I admire Chung Yu because I've been listening, and she appears to have not eaten for 24 hours. But what have I had besides a can of beer more than her? I lay there until noon when my phone suddenly started blowing up. First, a colleague from 3 floors down in the office, someone I barely spoke to, called me mysterious and cautious. She started by asking about my leave, and then went straight to the point. "Hey, Xiaofeng, is everything okay at home? Sister, did something happen at work? Oh no, just asking. Don't get upset. The children are the most important." What? How did you know about this? Chapter 10. Oh, I just heard it from others. Look on the bright side, it's so common these days. Too much idle time. Last year, it happened at the branch office too. It was a big deal. It even went up to headquarters. A lot of people know about it. I barely managed to get off the phone with my older sister, and within an hour, I received countless calls. Buddies, classmates I hadn't spoken to in years. Even friends who had emigrated sent messages asking me about it. I was stunned. Although I was mentally prepared, it spread too fast. I had a bad feeling. A while later, an unknown number called. "Hello, is this Fangyu?" "Oh, I'm Chung Yu's supervisor. There's something I need to discuss with you. Could you come in?" "Sure, what time?" "How about 2 p.m. at the Moa coffee shop?" After arranging the time and place to meet with her supervisor, a good friend of mine, Wang Tung, sent a voice message insisting on seeing me, saying he wanted to check on me and have lunch. No need to ask, he knew. Seeing that it was still early before 2 o'clock, I agreed. I was feeling frustrated and wanted to ask him how he found out. At lunch, Wang Tung said to me with a serious face, "Dude, I heard it on the commuter bus. They were all talking about you and this thing on their phones. I saw the photo and it was you." "Wait, what photo?" "The photo of you and your wife." "Where? Show me." Wang Tung hesitated for a moment, then took out his phone and showed me a message in a group chat. It was a collection of chat logs and pictures. Basically, a few people from Chung Yu's workplace were chatting in a group, saying that something happened at our workplace, that Chung Yu and Lu Jianxi were together, and that Chung Yu's husband reported them. They were asking if there were photos, and saying there were in Chung Yu's WeChat moments, showing a month's worth of her posts. I instantly understood. It was my oversight. When I reported them, I didn't close Chung Yu's moments, where she had posted a wedding anniversary memory, which included our wedding photos. Now they have been pulled from there and posted everywhere. Whatever. Even without my photo, the city is so small, people who know me would still know it's my wife. Wang Tung sighed and asked me what I planned to do. I said I had an appointment with Chung Yu's supervisor later, and Wang Tung offered to drive me, so I agreed. After a simple lunch, I drank some alcohol. It was bitter, so bitter. Wang Tung drove me to Mo coffee shop. An old man was standing outside, seemingly waiting for a long time. I recognized him as Chung Yu's former supervisor, the one in charge of safety production and public opinion guidance. Chung Yu said he was a good person and would retire in 2 years, so he must be very anxious about such a big incident happening at the workplace, and he took the initiative to talk to me, hoping to minimize the impact. The group I work for is involved in scientific research and has close ties with the news media, so it has considerable influence. I had considered posting it online directly, but I was worried about my future life, so I sent it directly to Chung Yu's work group. The old supervisor was clearly a seasoned veteran. Seeing that there was still room for maneuver, he asked me to meet. He probably wanted to smooth things over. We introduced ourselves. The old man's name was Qin Wuyin, and I called him Uncle Qin. Uncle Qin was very polite, offering cigarettes and pouring coffee. After a few pleasantries, he got straight to the point. He sighed and said with a worried face, "Fangyu, this is a big mess. It's having a huge impact." "No, Uncle Qin, this is an internal matter for the workplace, right? So what do you think should be done?" "What else can be done? They're both party members and leading cadres. They engaged in improper conduct, and the evidence is conclusive. They should be dealt with accordingly." My tone was firm, leaving no room for negotiation. "Fangyu, oh dear, this is a big deal. The higher-ups are furious. They deserve it." I sneered inwardly, not wanting to give Uncle Qin any room to maneuver. I immediately took out my phone, wanting to show the evidence of Chung Yu's infidelity, but suddenly realized I had been blocked by many work groups. I couldn't help but laugh in anger. Chung Yu's workplace acted so fast? But I quickly realized that it wasn't Uncle Qin who kicked Chung Yu out of the groups, but that Lu guy. The coward was scared too, because he was the admin of several groups. He must have been glued to his phone, and the moment the message was posted, he kicked her out. I could imagine how nervous Lou was at the time, and I felt a sense of relief. Uncle Chin, since they did it, they should be punished. I'm not like Lou with connections and background. I'm just an ordinary person. I can't just go to the workplace and kill them, right? I still have some basic legal knowledge. Uncle Chin was startled, as if he really thought I would do that. He said awkwardly, "Well, what if? And I mean if we could settle this privately? Like, have the parties involved offer some compensation?" I laughed angrily, my voice rising. I gritted my teeth and said, "Uncle Chin, I came here with sincerity to resolve the issue. There is absolutely no room for reconciliation. If I accept compensation, what does that make me? How much? That's my wife, at least nominally. How much per time? Annual subscription or monthly?" Uncle Chin sensed my deep resentment and said helplessly, "Then there's no way to reconcile." I took a deep breath and said solemnly, "I just want to ask, since the matter is blown up, the workplace has to give me an explanation. Uncle Chin, to be honest, I know quite a few people abroad. If I really want to post something, it'll be very difficult to delete it in China." Uncle Chin nodded, indicating he understood. I added, "It's precisely because I have feelings for the workplace that I don't want to make this public. After all, it's not good for unity. I still have this much sense of the bigger picture. Uncle Chin, give me your word." Uncle Chin pondered for a moment, then said seriously, "All right, since there's no reconciliation, let's follow procedure." I keenly sensed that Uncle Chin wanted to sweep this under the rug. It must be someone behind Lou pulling strings. To be able to make Section Chief Chin, who's in charge of safety production, personally come forward, they must have considerable influence. I had a premonition that things would get complicated, but I couldn't swallow this. Fine, let's follow procedure. Uncle Chin probably didn't expect this. After all his persuading, my words didn't sound like something someone within the system would say. He said he had encountered similar situations before, but everyone, considering the impact on the workplace, their own careers, and the principle of keeping family scandals private, usually tried to minimize the damage and keep things quiet. Chapter 11. But I insisted on following procedure, which wasn't impossible. After all, we live in a society governed by law. Uncle Chin pondered for a moment, then nodded and said, "Fong Yu, I understand how you feel. How about this? Tomorrow you come to the office and report Chung Yu and Lu Jian's issue to the Discipline Inspection Commission." After that, we chatted for a while, purely small talk. It was nothing but official jargon, saying that nowadays, employees have high educational backgrounds, and those of us who graduated from key universities have great potential and must seize the opportunity. Uncle Chin was probing me, gathering information to report back. He's in this line of work, acting as a mediator. Since he's doing his job, I couldn't get angry. But I was holding back my frustration. I went next door with Wang Tung for a few drinks, vented my frustrations, and felt much better. Wang Tung is my childhood friend, a brother I'd trust with my life. He recently got a girlfriend and is at the stage of discussing marriage. Seeing what happened to me, he was almost scared off from getting married. I saw a saying online before, "Date someone you like, but marry someone who likes you." It's absolutely true. For over a decade, I poured my heart and soul into Chung Yu, but it couldn't compete with some sweet nothings from that Lu guy. It's truly laughable. After parting with Wang Tung, he insisted on accompanying me to file the report tomorrow, worried that I would be outnumbered and that Lu would screw me over. I was touched and didn't refuse. When I got home, Chung Yu was still lying in the bedroom. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law didn't give me a good look, but they were also afraid of provoking me, so they were angry but didn't dare to speak. I no longer cared about their thoughts. Since I had decided to divorce Chung Yu, they would have nothing to do with me in the future. Besides, they still felt that Chung Yu wasn't at fault and that I should reflect on myself. I went into the study. After a while, the house was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. From yesterday until now, I was constantly busy, and only now did the aftereffects truly appear. The confusion and loneliness after the anger washed over me with the darkness, and I felt physically and mentally exhausted. Fear and worry finally crept into my heart. A good family just gone like that. Even if my report is successful and Chung Yu and Lu are taken down, what will I do afterward? When I exploded yesterday, I really didn't think too much. Now, I couldn't care less. I lay in bed, half asleep, sometimes dreaming bloody scenes of stabbing Chung Yu and chopping her into pieces, sometimes dreaming of us back in college, sitting in the park, embracing and talking about our hopes for the future. When I opened my eyes, my pillow was soaked. I didn't know if it was sweat or tears. Staying in this house was suffocating. I could only go to the balcony for air until dawn. The first rays of morning sunlight shone on me. Breathing in the cool air, I saw Wang Tung's car arrive downstairs. We went to Chung Yu's workplace together. Uncle Chin was waiting at the main entrance. Seeing us, he was all smiles, as if we were old friends meeting. He led us into the building. I felt someone staring at me. I looked up sharply, my gaze landing on the fourth floor, but I didn't see anything. Uncle Chin eagerly poured tea and made small talk for a few minutes before leading us to the office of Chung Yu's unit's director. The director was a young-looking cadre, but very dignified. He didn't smile throughout the meeting. He first let Uncle Chin finish speaking, then nodded and said, "Comrade Fong Yu, the unit has been informed of the matter. It has caused a very negative impact, and we will definitely investigate thoroughly." I quickly asked, "When will there be a conclusion?" The director countered, "Do you have any evidence?" I immediately took out my phone and showed him the conversation between Chung Yu and Liu. The director read it with a serious expression and sighed. There's definitely something going on between them. Isn't that obvious? The conversation screenshots were so blatant. How could there not be a problem? The director's tone changed. He looked me in the eye and said sternly, "According to our understanding from your wife's family, you resorted to violence after discovering this. Your wife is an employee of our unit, and our unit has a responsibility to protect our employees. Therefore, I must report this matter to the public security organs. Since you're here, why don't you give a statement as well later?" Hearing this, I understood. I narrowed my eyes. I actually wanted to explode on the spot. This was clearly an attempt to silence me, using my own employment against me. But I did resort to violence. The injuries were on Chung Yu. What should I say? Back down or fight back? But my mind couldn't process it at that moment because I was too exhausted from the past 2 days. Then Uncle Chin stepped in to mediate. He said a lot of meaningless things. I finally understood that besides the unit wanting to downplay the matter, Liu was also working behind the scenes. The director played the bad cop, and Uncle Chin played the good cop. Uncle Chin advised me to think things over carefully. After all, for the sake of my family and child, I shouldn't act too impulsively. I knew I couldn't fight back directly, or I would face consequences. So I pretended to agree to consider it. Uncle Chin insisted on driving me home and checking on Chung Yu by the way. I couldn't refuse. As we walked out of the building, I felt another malicious gaze. I looked up and met an ugly face. The other person smirked at me, with an indescribable contempt and disdain. I instantly recognized Liu. My eyes turned bloodshot. Seeing Liu so arrogant, I lost all reason and rushed towards the building. I was determined to kill him today. Wang Tung noticed something was wrong with me and quickly grabbed me, telling me not to be impulsive. Although Wang Tung is usually impulsive, and several of his girlfriends broke up with him because they couldn't stand his straightforwardness, he is very rational at critical moments. I'm grateful to have such a friend. Thinking back, I'm glad he stopped me. Otherwise, I might have fallen into Liu's trap. He deliberately appeared in front of me to provoke me. If I had gone up and hit him, even if I didn't kill him, with his connections, getting a light injury charge against me would be enough to cause me serious trouble. A light injury can lead to imprisonment. If I were in jail, I wouldn't have the opportunity to file a report. If the matter dragged on, it would definitely be swept under the rug. The one who would benefit would be Chung Yu, and she might even kick me while I was down. Uncle Chin panicked a bit. On the way back, he saw how angry I was and kept trying to persuade me, giving many examples, all about how a former colleague had a similar situation. Because of his wife's infidelity, he caused chaos at home and at work, and as a result, his child lacked love growing up and became a complete mess. I lay in the back seat, closing my eyes, unable to hear a word from the outside world. The rage filling my chest was about to make me explode. I had still taken things too simply. They were all part of the same unit. It was normal for them to cover for each other. They had probably already colluded with Uncle Chin and were waiting to see me become a laughingstock. Chapter 12. Uncle Chin's well-meaning words sounded like harsh mockery to me. But I didn't expose him, letting him continue his performance. Seeing my silence, he thought his words were having an effect and smiled even more kindly. At home, Uncle Chin first stood at the bedroom door and glanced at Chung Yu. I don't know if she was too ashamed to face anyone or simply had no energy, but she had her back to the door, and I couldn't see her face. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law, seeing their daughter's boss at the house, thought they had found someone to support them and started wailing, saying how badly I treated Chung-yu and that I was mostly to blame for her infidelity. If Wang Tung hadn't held me back, I would have slapped them both. Had I treated them badly? I'd poured my heart and soul into them, spending over $1 million. Who else had been such a sucker for over a decade? Now they were twisting the facts, truly vicious. Fortunately, Uncle Chin was good at smoothing things over. He briefly comforted them and then turned to me, starting by mentioning how highly valued Chung-yu was at work, how highly regarded she was by the higher-ups, and how she was due for a promotion soon. If this continued, it would all be ruined. He also said that Chung-yu was one of the most capable and talented young reserve cadres he'd met. He shouldn't have mentioned that. It just fueled my anger. Do you know where the article that got her so much attention came from? My dad wrote it. My dad did this kind of work before he retired. If his former workplace hadn't stopped him, he would have been a section chief long ago. Uncle Chin froze, his expression turning awkward. I didn't give him a chance to continue persuading me. Do you know who wrote her logistics management report at your year-end summary meeting a few days ago? I did. In late November the year before last, when she first took her current position, they wanted a summary report the following January, less than 2 months after she started. Not only was her previous production work completely unrelated to logistics, she hadn't even learned everyone's names yet. What could she possibly summarize? I spent 2 nights searching, compiling, and copying to put that together. This year, she couldn't do it again, so I wrote it again. I saw the chat records. After she submitted the report, someone messaged her praising her professionalism and expertise. By the way, are you short-staffed? Do you think I'd be a good fit? Uncle Chin's face was so red you could dig a 3-bedroom apartment out of it with your toes. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were unhappy and started arguing, saying how excellent Chung-yu was and how I didn't deserve her. They made me sound worthless, almost as if I deserved to be cheated on. They were so eager that they let something slip. My sister-in-law said that Lou was much better than me and had promised to find her a job much better than a receptionist. My brain short-circuited. I stared at my sister-in-law in disbelief. My mother-in-law realized her younger daughter had misspoken and quickly signaled her to be quiet. But my sister-in-law was used to being arrogant with me and continued with even more hurtful words. Filled with grief and indignation, I looked at Uncle Chin and said fiercely, "Uncle Chin, I've made up my mind. If your leadership wants to call the police, let them, one thing at a time. When I get out, I'll continue with my report. I'm going all in." I thought I was the first to know about Chung-yu's affair, but judging by my sister-in-law's tone, not only did she know, but she'd known for a long time. I finally remembered when my sister-in-law asked to borrow money, saying if I didn't lend it, plenty of others would. So she was thinking of Lou. Not only did they know, but they hid it from me while sucking me dry. Unutterable rage surged through me. This family was rotten to the core. How could I have been so blind to marry Chung-yu? Since they were so heartless, they shouldn't blame me for being ruthless. You're serious? My sister has worked like a dog all these years. Even if she doesn't deserve credit, she deserves some sympathy. You're so heartless and ungrateful. I didn't bother arguing with her. You can't wake someone who's pretending to be asleep. Since I had decided to report her, our relationship had completely deteriorated. From the moment I made up my mind, personally, Chung-yu was the villain who destroyed my family. And professionally, she was a rule breaker. I didn't need to let the blame fall on me for the sake of our decade-long relationship. I was completely disappointed in this family. Uncle Chin saw my determination and knew persuasion was useless. He sighed and nodded. All right then, come find me tomorrow, and we'll go through the procedures. You heartless bastard. You actually reported your own wife. There's no one as cruel as you in this world. You dare harm my daughter, I'll fight you to the death. I didn't fight with the old woman. I laughed in exasperation. Fine. Since you think I'm worthless, I'll definitely get a divorce. But over the years, Chung-yu transferred money to you without my consent, plus her father's medical expenses. That's at least 500,000 or 600,000, right? That's marital property, and I'm going to get it back. That was agreed upon when we got married. And besides, it's only natural for my daughter to give me money. I said calmly, don't give me that nonsense. If you can't pay it back, go tell it to the court. Seeing that I was serious, my mother-in-law panicked and stopped her bluster. Through gritted teeth, she said, "Just you wait. Harming people like this, you'll get your comeuppance sooner or later. If anyone's getting their comeuppance, it's Chung Yu. Throwing away a good home to be someone's mistress. How prestigious. You know how much money I've spent on your family over the years. I'm a total sucker. If you can't pay back the money, keep your mouth shut." Disgusting. I really didn't want to argue with my mother-in-law anymore. I glanced at the lifeless Chung Yu and growled. "The day you cheated, you should have known the consequences. Since you're playing dead, I'll make sure you die." My sister-in-law's cries came from outside, begging my mother-in-law not to jump out the window. I sneered inwardly. My mother-in-law valued her life more than anyone. She was just putting on a show. Only a fool would believe it. When my sister-in-law said those words, helping Chung Yu conceal her affair, I knew I had to completely sever ties with this family. For my son's sake, I hadn't planned to completely destroy Chung Yu, but they truly didn't treat me like a human being. So they shouldn't blame me for being ruthless. I went back to the study and locked the door. Chapter 13. Last night, probably because I was too tired from the day before, I barely slept a wink, so I slept soundly. I was woken up by Wang Ting's phone call, and when I opened my eyes, it was already 10 a.m. After getting ready, I got in the car and headed to Chung Yu's workplace. Previously, under the threat from the top boss, I had some reservations, but Lu's provocation, coupled with the stimulation from Chung Yu's family, made me decide to go all out. Consequences be damned. The car arrived at the entrance of Chung Yu's workplace. Wang Ting asked me to wait, pulled out a pack of premium cigarettes, and walked towards the security booth. I understood he wanted to gather information and had no objections. 10 minutes later, Wang Ting returned to the car with a grim expression and told me about Lu. I didn't know until I asked, but it turns out the whole workplace knew what kind of person Lu was. This wasn't his first offense. Last month, a young woman's family came to the workplace to cause a scene, saying that Lu had gotten her pregnant and they wanted justice, but they couldn't even get past the main gate. I suddenly remembered something and cursed through gritted teeth. Bitch! Chung Yu had told me about this last month, but the story was reversed. She portrayed the girl as a bar hostess who deliberately set a trap for Lu after seeing his status. She even asked me how to handle the situation to avoid any negative impact on Lu. I just casually said that it was typical of a scumbag not to realize he was being trapped until the girl got pregnant. I noticed Chung Yu's expression was unpleasant at the time and thought I had said the wrong thing. Thinking about it now, I'm such a fool. From this perspective, Chung Yu clearly knew that Lu was playing around outside and that she wasn't his only lover, not even a mistress. And me? Not only was I blamed, but I almost helped that beast devise a plan. Thinking about it now makes me feel sick to my stomach. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I cursed again, although I had given up on Chung Yu. At this moment, I had murderous thoughts and couldn't wait to destroy that adulterous couple. Wang Ting didn't expect my reaction to be so strong and advised me to stay calm and not be led by the nose during the reporting process. I took a deep breath, looked at myself in the rearview mirror, and nodded. Uncle Chin came out of the gate, still wearing a kind smile. We went up to him and, without further pleasantries, went straight to the point. But Uncle Chin said that the unit's disciplinary committee couldn't handle this matter, mainly because they didn't have the authority. We had to go to the next level, the branch company's headquarters. So we took Uncle Chin's car to the branch company's office building. The person who received us was the director of the branch company's disciplinary committee, a man in his early 40s, wearing a gray jacket and black frame glasses. He looked harmless, but I knew that to reach the position of director of the branch company's disciplinary committee, he either had strong backing or strong personal abilities. Either way, if he intended to favor Lu, the reporting process would be difficult. On the way to the office, I had already prepared myself. If the branch company's headquarters tried to shirk responsibility, I would bring out the company's rules and regulations, specifically those related to work conduct, which I had memorized. Although I was an ordinary citizen, and this was the first time I had gone to the disciplinary committee to report, and the subject was my nominal wife and the well-connected Lu, no matter what, having taken the first step, there was no turning back. Strangely, the anticipated difficulties didn't materialize. The director of the branch company's disciplinary committee was approachable and received us warmly. His tone was sympathetic. He said, "Comrade Fong Yu, I've heard about your family matters. No man could accept this. Let's skip the small talk and start the process." The procedure was very formal. First, he had me draft a written report which stated, "I am Fong Yu, and I am hereby reporting the inappropriate relationship between Chung Yu and Liu Jianxi from our company. I have a large amount of call records and video evidence. I earnestly request the organization to investigate." After signing it and handing it to the director, he asked me to present the evidence and took photos of it from my phone. The process was completed quickly, and we left the office building. It was noon when we stepped out of the gate. The sun was high in the sky, and the sunlight was exceptionally dazzling. I looked up directly at it, feeling as if I had been reborn. An indescribable feeling welled up in my heart. It's quite tragic when I think about it. I came here full of anger, but when I actually submitted the report, my heart was still pounding and I felt lost and helpless. I resented Chung Yu, but resentment aside, the thought that the person I reported was my wife of over a decade, the mother of my son, and that our love story, from school uniforms to wedding dresses, had come to an end was devastating. Uncle Chin dropped me off at my workplace and then went off to attend to other matters, probably reporting the specifics to the leadership. I didn't think much about it, believing that Chung Yu and Liu Jianxi were finished. Before coming, I had searched online about cases where wives reported their husbands, who were company leaders. Most of them had results within a few days. I thought my report would be no different. But as soon as I got into Wang Teng's car, I received a text message from an unknown number, which immediately infuriated me. It was clearly a provocation from Liu. It read, "Don't push your luck. This isn't the first time I've been reported. Let's play this out slowly." The tone was arrogant and dismissive, as if he didn't take it seriously at all. I trembled with rage and quickly typed a reply to curse him out, but I had already been blocked. After reading the message, Wang Teng's face darkened. He said this wasn't over and that we had to ruin Liu's reputation. He knew many people in the media who could help spread the story. Originally, I didn't want to air my dirty laundry online, but with Liu being so arrogant, I had a feeling things wouldn't go smoothly. I had always heard that these kinds of situations could be troublesome. This is a society ruled by law, and public opinion matters. Society is generally bright, and there should be a place to seek justice. Unfortunately, I was still too naive. Liu had probably been reported more than once, not just by the pregnant girl, but likely by others as well. Wang Teng seemed even angrier than me and immediately contacted his friends, but the results were disappointing. After learning the details, they kept making excuses and saying the situation was tricky. I had anticipated this outcome, so I was resigned but accepting. After all, they also had to make a living. Wang Teng was frustrated at not getting the results he wanted, complaining that those people usually acted like brothers, but none of them could help when it mattered. I understood their difficulties and said we should first see how the branch company's headquarters handled the situation and then think of other solutions if necessary. I originally thought that after reporting to the disciplinary committee, that adulterous couple would quickly pay the price. But the thought that the results might not be satisfactory made my heart sink. I didn't rush home, but instead found a place with Wang Teng to discuss our next plan. Chapter 14. If the branch's disciplinary committee really helps Liu stall, dragging it on for 3 to 5 years, the situation will be long gone. After much discussion, we finally found a feasible solution. First, I'll learn how to post online and gain traffic, using public opinion to pressure the authorities to deal with Chung Yu and Liu. This is a last resort. If the traffic is high and this family scandal goes public, I'm worried my parents won't be able to handle it. The company will also be very angry. After all, it affects their reputation, and they will definitely try to obstruct me. My future promotions within the company will be impossible. But I can't worry about that much. Liu is too arrogant. I can't swallow this anger unless he's utterly disgraced. Wang Teng told me that his friend was sorry. Although he couldn't directly post the video, he could help me generate traffic and also told me some industry secrets. If I directly post on Douyin or WeChat, with the group's influence, it's very easy for them to delete it. It's best to find a more open platform, so he recommended Weibo. I diligently took notes and expressed my gratitude. This is a desperate, mutually destructive approach, and I don't know what the final outcome will be. On the way home, my heart was heavy. When I reached the building entrance, I saw an ambulance. 2 paramedics were carrying a stretcher with Chung Yu on it. Without waiting for me to speak, they put her in the ambulance and left. I hurried home. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law had packed their bags and glared at me fiercely, as if I had done something heinous. Before leaving, my sister-in-law regained her usual arrogance and snorted, "You'll get your comeuppance sooner or later." My mother-in-law gritted her teeth and joined in the cursing. I watched them calmly, like two jumping clowns. Once Chung-Yu leaves this house, it will be the last time. I will never have anything to do with their family again. Seeing my lack of reaction, they looked as if they had punched cotton. With a vicious expression, they said, "You'll beg my daughter to come home." I almost laughed. That woman, disloyal to the marriage, leaving this house. I should be setting off firecrackers to celebrate. In the evening, I received a call from my mother and learned how cruel my mother-in-law's methods were. I thought Chung-Yu's injuries weren't serious. Except for one kick, I didn't use my full strength for the other two blows, otherwise she wouldn't have been able to get up. Although I was in a state of extreme anger at the time. After all, it was a relationship of over 10 years, and I didn't try to kill her. Unexpectedly, she didn't come back that night, and I didn't call. My mom called and said my son was distressed and wouldn't sleep at all. No matter how she tried to soothe him, he kept crying for his mother. My son had been overjoyed when his grandmother and aunt arrived, but they left abruptly, and even his mother disappeared. He ran from room to room, searching for them. This scene reminded me of my childhood. My father was very busy with work, so without my knowledge, they left me, a 6-year-old, at my grandmother's house. Although I returned to my parents a few years later, I still remember the day I woke up and couldn't find my parents. I searched everywhere in my grandmother's small house. The bathroom, the wardrobe, under the bed. I thought my parents were playing hide-and-seek with me until I couldn't find them even after searching the cupboards. And then I burst into tears. My son is only 3 years old now. He probably can't think that much, just running around the house, finally calming down a bit after being held by my mother. Pain, sorrow, love, and anger surged through me. My gaze fell on the wedding photos on the wall, taken in Suzhou right after graduation. Now, they were so glaring, they were blinding. So I took them down one by one, called Wang Tung, and asked him to wait downstairs, then grabbed an axe and carried the wedding photos outside. Seeing what I was carrying, Wang Tung knew what I was going to do. He silently took them and put them in the trunk. We drove to a corner of a construction site away from the road, found some dry grass, and laid the photos on top. With a ferocious expression, I swung the axe hard at the wedding photos. I seemed to see in Wang Tung's pained expression that he heard the sound of bone, not wood, being chopped. The wedding photos were indeed solid wood, worth every penny. The burning time was long enough to roast a whole ox. In the firelight, I saw a person's sincerity being burned away, becoming cold. What was being devoured was the Buddha in a person's heart, transforming into a demon. My mom said the child was awake again. I understood. She was using the child to remind me not to do anything stupid, trying to hear any emotional changes in my voice. But my mom has heart problems, and my dad has vascular issues. The two elderly people were exhausted from taking care of the child, and I didn't know when something might happen. Those who haven't taken care of children have no idea how difficult it is. They only see nannies and babysitters making money. When you actually do it yourself, you can go crazy. I was still insomniac, tired but unable to sleep. I hoped the disciplinary committee would act quickly. After all, it was a real name registered WeChat account, words I said myself, and chat records I could recover. They couldn't run from that, could they? I've seen online that local disciplinary committees usually handle things in 2 or 3 days. If it drags on too long, I don't know how I'll cope. No wonder my mother-in-law and sister-in-law said what they did before leaving, implying they would use the child to threaten me, to negotiate terms later. Such a young child. How can he be without his mother? It's cruel. The next day, my son was supposed to go to the kindergarten near our home, but I didn't send him. Instead, I took him out to play, both to relax and to give my mother a break. We took a taxi to eat fast food. My son mentioned wanting his mother again. I sighed. "Let's go see Mom," I said. So I took my excited son to the hospital indicated on the ambulance yesterday. At the hospital, I asked the nurse at the front desk which ward Chung-Yu was in. The nurse checked and said there was no such person. I had no choice but to take my son home and call my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, but they didn't answer. I called Chung-Yu's relatives and friends according to her phone contacts, and they all said she wasn't with them. Then I knew. No need to search. I'll just wait for them to contact me. At this point, I checked Chung-Yu's WeChat and couldn't log in. She must have had someone freeze her account. Chapter 15. My initial feeling was that since she left without any formal procedures, she must be trying to gain something. It's obvious what she's using. Knowing my parents' poor health, she dumped a 3-year-old child on us, hoping we'd buckle under the pressure and beg her to return, allowing her to dictate the terms of her comeback. Realizing this, I knew I had to change my stance. There's no point in having expectations for an enemy. I thought it would take Chungyu a long time to contact me, waiting for my family to fall apart before making her demands. Unexpectedly, that very night, my mother-in-law sent me several voice messages, berating me. Has your conscience been eaten by a dog? How could you be so cruel? Are you trying to drive her to her death? If anything happens to my daughter, I'll die with you. Her insults were incredibly harsh, hysterical, as if we had a deep-seated feud. Well, she wasn't wrong. When Chungyu left, she took the household money I'd given her, around a few $100,000. It was marital property. Now, who knows where she's hiding, probably too ashamed to face anyone. Already frustrated, I snapped under her barrage of curses. Your whole family is a bunch of leeches. You have no right to talk about conscience. Don't think I won't curse you back just because you're older. If you have something to say, say it. Otherwise, shut up. She yelled. You still won't admit it. It's because you cheated. You think you're some prize? If you weren't bad to my daughter, someone else wouldn't have pursued her happiness. I was blind to let my daughter marry you. My face darkened. She has the nerve to cheat. Ask yourself, have I treated you poorly over the past decade? I've worked tirelessly for this family, and in the end, it couldn't withstand Lou's sweet talk. You haven't seen your daughter's slutty behavior, have you? I'll show you right now. I was so angry I was incoherent. My in-laws had disappeared for days, leaving me emotionally drained. I knew their game plan, no compromise. Anyone who could forgive being cheated on deserves a medal. My mother-in-law continued ranting, so I hung up. The world was instantly quiet. Soon, she sent me several links. One was to a trending forum post, with over 10,000 replies in just half a day. The title was glaring. Marry a reformed prostitute, but never a cheating wife. Affair between XX unit female cadre Ching X and Lu XX. Although Chungyu's photos were censored, they were barely covered, easily identifiable. Lu Jincha's photo wasn't censored at all. Below were chat logs and a video of Chungyu denying the affair. This was the content I had angrily posted in Chungyu's workgroup chat, copied verbatim. The post was written in the first person, making me the prime suspect. The second link was to a Weibo post titled, What's the truth behind the affair between male and female cadres at XX unit? It had been reposted hundreds of times. There were links to other apps, but they weren't as popular. I didn't bother clicking. The content was likely the same. My mother-in-law was furious because she assumed I'd expose Chungyu and lose affair online for revenge. For a face-saving rural woman, this was a devastating blow. They thought using our child as leverage would prevent me from publicizing anything, as family scandals are kept private. Now, this online exposure had severely impacted them, so I was the first suspect. I, of course, denied it, but she didn't believe me, cursing me vehemently and wishing me hell. Uncle Chin from Chungyu's workplace called, sighing and saying I was too impulsive. I repeatedly insisted it wasn't me. He was skeptical, saying it was pointless to argue since it had already happened. The unit leaders were furious about the damage to their reputation and had reported it to the police for defamation. I hadn't done it, so I wasn't worried. 2 days later, the posts were deleted. I learned the truth, which was quite comical. Everyone thought I'd posted out of revenge, but it was someone else from Chungyu's unit. One was Lu Jincha's superior, divorced and single for years, even more promiscuous than Lu. He held some power and had many affairs. He'd pursued Chungyu for years, but was rejected. Finding out she was with Lu, he felt deeply insulted and posted online for revenge. The other was Lu Jincha's rival, who lacked Lu's connections and resorted to dirty tricks. This kind of drama is common in both public and private sectors. Wherever there are people, there's infighting. Chungyu and Lu's rapid promotions naturally sparked jealousy, so there would likely be more trouble. Chungyu's boss held a staff meeting, emphasizing conduct and discipline, forbidding employees from discussing the matter under threat of severe punishment. A week later, things calmed down. The posts were deleted without my intervention, but new ones kept popping up, suggesting Lu had made many enemies. Leaving that aside, something happened with my son. I finally understood the cruelty of my in-laws' tactics and the severe impact on my family. I had a premonition. The lack of a mother was a serious issue for my son. Shortly after arguing with my mother-in-law, I received a call from his kindergarten teacher saying he'd hit someone. I was stunned. My son was usually well-behaved, a bit mischievous, but not violent. It turned out the teacher had assigned a drawing of their mothers. My son, having not seen his mother for a long time, started crying. Another child, likely influenced by gossip at home, said he didn't have a mother. Kids say the darndest things, but those meddling parents shouldn't have discussed our family affairs. My son, enraged, fought with the child, nearly blinding him. The situation was serious, so the teacher had to call me. Chapter 16. I rushed to the school and saw a young couple surrounding my son. He was huddled in a corner, his face full of grievance, tears streaming down. My heart felt like it was being squeezed, making it hard to breathe. The couple wanted to continue lecturing him, so I rushed forward and shielded my son, glaring at them angrily. Probably intimidated by my demeanor, they stopped scolding but threatened to call the police, saying that if their child's eyes were damaged, I would be responsible for life. With a cold face, I asked the kindergarten to retrieve the surveillance footage. After watching the video, the parents looked embarrassed, their confidence significantly diminished. After all, they shouldn't have been bad-mouthing others in front of the children. We went to the hospital for a checkup. Their child's eyes were fine, and the matter was dropped. My son has been staying with my parents for the past few days. When he saw me, he reached out for a hug, then cried out, "Mommy!" My heart ached. Children understand nothing. They're the most innocent, yet they have to bear the consequences of their parents' mistakes. He could have been happily attending kindergarten, but now he's become the subject of ridicule. My son is only 3 years old. He may not understand what divorce means, but he knows his mother isn't around, and he's lost his biggest support. Since reporting Chungyu, I've planned to raise my son alone and made ample mental preparations. But ideals are beautiful, reality is cruel. Children from single-parent families are indeed prone to problems. After returning home, my son kept calling for his mother, running through every room, crying his heart out. Although I hate Chungyu, she carried him for 10 months. Our relationship is over, but it shouldn't involve the child. After weighing things over, I started sending WeChat messages to my mother-in-law, asking Chungyu to see her son. Because Chungyu had blocked me, I could only contact those around her. But my mother-in-law didn't respond. I bit the bullet and had my son send a voice message. "Mommy, please see me, please." Perhaps it was the child's cries that softened their hearts. My mother-in-law quickly initiated a video call. Overjoyed, I hurriedly pressed answer. My son blinked his big eyes, tears streaming down his face, full of anticipation. Unexpectedly, as I answered, the screen flashed, and the call ended. I thought it was a signal problem, so I called back. They hung up again. I tried several times, finally confirming they didn't want to answer. That is to say, Chungyu didn't want to see her son. I clenched my phone, a fire burning in my chest. My son, thinking he would see his mother, was met with disappointment and cried even harder, repeatedly calling for her. I could only suppress my anger and comfort him. Exhausted from crying, he fell asleep in my arms. Looking at his innocent face, I finally lost control, gritting my teeth and yelling at the phone. "Chungyu, are you so cruel? You won't even see your son? I'll make sure you two bastards suffer for the rest of your lives." There was still silence. Now my family is broken. I only have my parents and my son. At middle age, I don't ask for much, just peace and health. But Chungyu's affair ruined our family. The intensity of my hatred now matches the intensity of my love for her then. My son is innocent. Why use him as a tool? I can't believe there's such a heartless woman in the world. So, my hatred reached its peak. The next day, I left my child with my parents and asked for leave from work. My boss probably knew about my family issues and told me to take a good rest and return to work after everything was settled. I went straight to Chungyu's workplace to inquire about the results of Uncle Chin's report. The results stunned me. Dismissal. When I heard the outcome from Uncle Chin, I almost broke down, unwilling to believe it. They had serious misconduct. I filed a formal complaint, and it even caused a significant stir online. Yet they were only dismissed. I couldn't accept it. I persisted. "Uncle Chin, There must be a written disciplinary action document. I want to see it. Uncle Chin looked troubled. I'm afraid that's not possible. You're not from this unit. And I understood. It must be Lu's doing. No wonder he dared to send that provocative text message that day. He must have known the outcome beforehand. He must have been through this before. But Lu caused such a big incident, and he was only dismissed. What does dismissal mean? I'm not illiterate. I understand what it means. It means Chung-yu and Lu are relieved of their current positions. Aside from that, there are no other penalties. Is that possible? Perhaps many people think they've been punished upon hearing dismissal, but they haven't. Compared to their wrongdoing, it's a slap on the wrist. On the news or in government documents, we often see announcements of dismissals. Those are usually followed by reassignments. It's not the same as being disciplined for wrongdoing. Anyway, I learned the outcome and my blood pressure skyrocketed. I insisted that Uncle Chin give me an explanation. Uncle Chin sighed, becoming impatient, and said, "This is the result of discussions from above. There's nothing I can do. If you're still unsatisfied, you can ask the branch company's disciplinary committee." The document was issued from there. I knew he was shirking responsibility, but I didn't push him too hard. After all, Uncle Chin was just a small figure in the unit, not even middle management. He had no authority over personnel matters or any other signing authority. He could only follow orders. Naturally, I was dissatisfied. I went to the branch company's office and found the director of the disciplinary committee. He gave me the same line. The result was from discussions above, and they couldn't do anything about it. I was furious, wanting to shout and ask if Lu had connections, if they were protecting each other, but I held back. This was a government agency, after all. Making too much of a fuss wouldn't be good for me. Leaving the office building, I felt depressed and lost. I thought that after reporting them, those two dogs would be quickly punished and pay the price. Jail time wasn't necessary, but at least some disciplinary action. But they got off scot-free. Now I truly understand that an ordinary person, going through the proper channels, has almost no chance against officials. Just protecting one's rights is an arduous journey. And this is with me having solid evidence. Their response was a single word: dismissal. What can you do about them? Even if I expose this online, it won't have any effect. Their handling of the situation was by the book. Chapter 17. Sensing my low spirits, someone from the disciplinary committee called shortly after I left. They expressed sympathy for my situation, but explained they had handled the matter fairly. Similar cases in the past had been resolved privately, but mine, reporting my own wife, was the first of its kind to be brought before the 5-person committee. He offered another explanation. Although I couldn't see the official document, the dismissal was only a preliminary decision, pending Chung-yu and Lu's return to work. Unfortunately, they both claimed illness and hadn't returned, citing poor physical and mental health. The unit couldn't force them to come for questioning, and it wasn't within the disciplinary committee's jurisdiction. Institutions like this might play games, but they also had a human side. I hung up and walked alone down the street, the traffic rushing past, a tightness in my chest. Ideals are full, but reality is cruel. I thought Chung-yu and Lu would be swiftly punished, but a mere dismissal felt like pouring water on a raging fire, offering no release. They must have known the outcome all along, hence their brazen provocation. I didn't rush home, wandering for a long time to calm down. I was afraid to face my 3-year-old son. After the divorce, he was destined to grow up in a single-parent family. What would I tell him when he was old enough to ask? The incident at kindergarten was still fresh in my mind. I sighed, resigned to taking things one step at a time. Giving up on revenge was impossible. I couldn't swallow this. Wang Tung had advised me. Why should a real man worry about lacking a wife? Someone like Chung-yu, heartless and unmoved after all these years, isn't worth your energy. Of course, I knew it wasn't worth it. But I had loved Chung-yu deeply for over a decade, given her almost everything. To be suddenly betrayed, cuckolded for 2 years, and ultimately lose to an older man. Could anyone understand this feeling? My heart burned with the flames of resentment and humiliation, fueling a desire for revenge. A man lives for his pride. On my way home, I was still thinking about how to ease the relationship between my son and Chung-yu. She was his mother, after all. A mother's betrayal could severely impact a child's development. But I held little hope. We had already fallen out. She was probably only thinking about her affair with Lu, even abandoning her son. For Chung-yu, such a seemingly honest woman. To make the decision to cheat, she must have considered the consequences of being discovered. Yet she still threw herself at Lou like a moth to a flame. She must have thought she found true love. The more I thought, the more ridiculous and hateful it seemed. I shook my head, feeling disgusted. As I reached my doorstep, a text from an unknown number arrived. I opened it, and the anger I had suppressed erupted. It was a photo, nothing explicit, but the timestamp was from yesterday, and the woman in the photo was Chung-Yu. This meant that while they were hiding, while I thought she was too ashamed to show her face, like a rat in the streets, she was actually doing just fine. With Lou. The unknown number was the same as the previous provocative message. Who else could it be but Lou? I hadn't expected Chung-Yu to be so shameless, not only unrepentant, but continuing the affair even after being exposed. Damn it, I couldn't describe my rage. I roared in fury. The background of the photo wasn't a hotel or a home, but an office. Chung-Yu's office. I had been there before. There was a strong Kong toy on the desk, our son's favorite. Lou was deliberately provoking me. He was saying, see, even if you report me, nothing happens. I'm still fine, and I can even play with your wife in her office. I didn't care if Lou was twisted. I had only one thought, to kill them both. I rushed inside, grabbed a kitchen knife, and hid it in my sleeve. I had planned to pick up my son from my parents' house, but now revenge consumed me. I knew that if I killed them, I would be finished too. So, I wrote a will, apologizing to my parents for not repaying their kindness and expressing my love for my son. But my heart was filled with murderous intent. They were shitting on my head and forcing me to eat it. If I endured this, I'd be worse than Wu Dalong. After writing the will, I stormed out to Chung-Yu's workplace. Ironically, fate seemed to be against me. I drove our red Mazda out of the garage, flooring the accelerator, fueled by hatred. My start was as dramatic as a TV show, but the ending was pathetic. Consumed by rage and the thought of killing them, I drove the car into a ditch a few miles down the road. I crawled out, staring at the mangled front end, drenched in cold sweat. The airbag had deployed. My head swam as I sat on the ground. If not for the city speed limit, this crash would have sent me to meet Yama. The near-death experience calmed me. The moment the car went into the ditch, I thought I was going to die. The image of my devastated parents and my orphaned son flashed through my mind, softening my heart. Was it worth it for a worthless woman? I covered my face and sobbed uncontrollably. A grown man, weeping on the side of the road, must have been a pitiful sight. Soon, someone called the police. I composed myself, dealt with the police and insurance, and finally had the car towed away by evening. Exhausted, the thought of murder had vanished. When I got home, I saw my parents sitting on the sofa, anxious and worried. My mother clutched my will, looking at me, wanting to speak but hesitant. They looked years older, their bodies trembling on the sofa. They wanted to talk to me, but were afraid to upset me. Feeling their concern, I cursed myself for almost making a terrible mistake. If not for the crash, I would probably be in jail. I didn't know how to explain the will. Saying everything was fine wouldn't be believable. Just then, Wang Tung arrived with some friends. Seeing me, he was visibly relieved and insisted on taking me out for drinks. My parents seemed more at ease with my friends there. Besides Wang Tung and me, there were two other close friends. Chapter 18. A self-media guy named Lu Feng and a civil servant named Cheng Lin. After a few rounds of drinks, Lu Feng spoke first, raising his glass. Feng Yu, he said, what happened to you is similar to my situation. I sneered, trying to comfort me by shitting on yourself? Lu Feng shook his head and sighed. I'm not lying. My fiancée works in the public sector. Her family, just like yours, are social climbers and leeches. The bride price alone cost me $300,000. It was easy to make money a few years ago, but now the national economy is undergoing a major transformation, and it's not as easy to earn as before. So, my fiancée got involved with her boss and even got pregnant. I looked up speechless. Everyone has their own troubles these days. These days, as long as you have money, what kind of woman can't you find? Love is such a joke. After I found out, I slapped her twice. Her parents didn't dare say a word and obediently returned the bride price. Last night, I went to a club to unwind. A woman like her, 500 yuan a night is too much. As Lu Feng spoke, though his words were tough, His eyes reddened, clearly showing his distress. "Drink up." The four of us drank for a long time. Before leaving, Chung Lin, who had been silent, pulled me aside and said mysteriously, "I've inquired about your situation. That Lu guy is really a piece of work. He's played with quite a few good girls, but he has connections." I perked up, finally hearing something useful. Chung Lin looked around and whispered, "A friend of mine happens to hang out with him and knows something about his family. I heard his uncle is the vice chairman of your group's headquarters." I froze, suddenly understanding. No wonder Lu was so arrogant. No wonder the branch office wouldn't handle it. But Chung Lin's next sentence enlightened me. To deal with someone, you must first grasp their fatal weakness. What does Lu care about most? Chung Lin's words left me in deep thought. I felt like I had grasped the key point. I lit a cigarette and took a few drags, pondering. These past few days, waves of classmates and friends had been taking me out for meals and offering comfort. I'd eaten countless meals and heard countless comforting words. Though I was grateful, none of it was of any real use. What I needed was revenge, useful information, intelligence, and a plan. To succeed, I first needed to build a platform to gather intelligence, and I had to watch the opponent and net to catch their weaknesses. Whether ancient or modern, any plan requires intelligence to succeed. But where would I get it? I couldn't just stand outside their office and ask everyone, could I? Besides, the target was too small. Lu, frankly, was just a small-time official in this circle, a nobody in society. Moreover, I couldn't stay on leave forever. I had to go back to work in a couple of days. And there was my child. Now I was responsible for everything at home, big and small. Even if I had the ability, where would I find the time to build an intelligence network? Chung Yu was quite capable, giving me such a difficult task. It was probably her mother's idea, using the child to wear me down. Chung Yu's infidelity put her in the wrong. In a divorce, she'd likely leave with nothing. Her only leverage was the child. But they miscalculated. They didn't know that Lu's photos had been the final straw. I'd been hesitant about going all the way. But Lu's arrogance, and Chung Yu still messing around with him even after being reported, was too much. Any man would find this unbearable. So, I decided to go for broke. Even if I lost my job, I would destroy those too. I rudely threw my cigarette, but on the ground, and stomped on it. I asked Chung Lin, "What can I do?" "What would you do?" "I think you can only attack him through party discipline, ruin his career and reputation. Anything else is meaningless." Chung Lin, Bukui Shurti Drunoida, currently working in the municipal government secretariat, had come into contact with many people and had a clearer perspective than I did. His words were like a bolt of lightning. I had initially been discouraged because of Lu's powerful connections, understanding the dangers of an ordinary person fighting someone like him, even in modern society. Chung Lin broadened my perspective. He was indeed a secretary. If, as you say, they're being heavily criticized now and are under a lot of pressure, they won't show their faces for a while, let alone return to work. So, I won't see any results from the Discipline Inspection Commission anytime soon. This isn't something to rush. His relatives have such a powerful background, so he must be eager to climb higher. Just wait and see. Chung Lin smiled mysteriously. His words reminded me. Normally, if my father were in charge of propaganda in the political and legal system, and I entered the same system, I would definitely try to advance further. Lu had this opportunity, and as Chung Lin said, he had started building momentum years ago, clearly paving the way for promotion. As the saying goes, the three greatest grudges are killing one's father, stealing one's wife, and ruining one's livelihood. I had no interest in killing his father as retribution, nor was I interested in another man's wife. That left ruining his livelihood. I slowly started to piece things together. Chung Lin also said that since the matter had been exposed and there was so much public outcry, they would obviously want to lie low. The best way to do that was to take leave, using health as an excuse. But taking leave in the public sector was easier said than done. If you looked into it closely, few reasons held up. I suddenly remembered the photos Lu had sent. They were clearly not sick and were hiding in the unit, with Uncle Chin obviously covering for them. The head of the branch office's Discipline Inspection Commission said that they were unwell and couldn't be forcibly interrogated. As long as they were forced out, things would become much simpler. A conversation with him was worth 10 years of reading. He truly deserved his position in the municipal government. This friendship was valuable. As the saying goes, 3 cobblers are equal to 1 Jugalion. With the advice of my friend, my revenge plan became clearer. I exhaled heavily, feeling a sense of empowerment. I sneered inwardly. Lou, let's play slowly. After all that had happened, I had given up on the idea of advancing. Even if I left the system, I would get my revenge. But didn't you want a promotion? We'll see who cracks first. I underestimated Chung Yu's ruthlessness and overestimated my own resilience. Although I was prepared for a long battle, when I returned home and heard my son crying for his mother, my heart ached. I had often heard older generations talk about how hard it was for someone to raise a child as both mother and father. TV dramas also frequently portrayed positive stories of great fathers raising several children. It didn't seem like a big deal. Chapter 19. With our current living situation, things shouldn't be worse than before. But when it actually happened to me, I realized it wasn't that simple. Just taking care of the child alone consumed so much energy. I picked up my son and, to distract him, took him to the playground in the supermarket. At first, he was very happy. There were many children around, all sliding on the slides together. But he soon stopped at a game racing car, yelling that he wanted to learn to drive. Without much thought, I spent 2 yuan and played with him once. After the game ended, he wanted to play again. I thought it was just a child being playful, so I paid again. But as we played, I felt something was wrong. My son kept staring at the road on the screen, his mind no longer on the game itself. I couldn't help but ask him what he was looking at. He pointed to a female character in the game and said, "I want to learn to drive." I was surprised. "Why?" My son thought for a moment, very seriously, then smiled. "I want to drive to find Mommy." At that moment, I almost burst into tears. If it weren't for the crowd, I would have cried my heart out. Chung Yu's leaving made me truly understand the cruelty to our child. She was so heartless, abandoning our 3-year-old son to mess around with her lover, using our child as a bargaining chip to force me to compromise. I never imagined that a once loving couple could become so hateful, willing to hurt our son. He asked me again when Mommy would come back. His kindergarten teacher asked them to draw pictures of their mothers, hoping to complete the assignment together with them. Then his eyes reddened and he mumbled, "Does Mommy not want me anymore?" My heart felt like it was being stabbed with a knife, a dull ache. All the suppressed feelings of these past days, the exhaustion, resentment, worry, and anxiety, unconsciously and silently broke through my defenses at this moment. I'm not made of iron. I have a heart. I have feelings. A 3-year-old's words pierced the dam in my heart. Trembling, I lit a cigarette and quickly turned my back, walking towards a deserted area. After a few steps, tears welled up in my eyes. A few more steps, and I could feel the warm streams flowing down my cheeks. A man who had always considered crying a disgrace, a stereotypical tough guy, was now in tears. Finally, I knelt down Paze Changdong song and let the tears flow freely. I didn't dare to cry out loud, but my shoulders shook with sobs. I didn't dare to look up, worried my son might wander off, but as I cried, I listened intently for the sound of his laughter. Each burst of laughter felt like a stick poking at my tear ducts, making the tears flow even faster. As I sobbed, I remembered the moments I shared with Chung Yu, the warmth of our small family of 3. However, the image gradually blurred and faded away. I wanted to hold my son in my arms and cry, but I couldn't. Then, for a fleeting moment, the image of that fat, ugly face of Lou flashed through my mind. Strangely, it was as if someone had suddenly shut off a water valve. My eyes couldn't squeeze out another tear. I took a few deep breaths to calm myself down, waiting until the burning sensation in my throat subsided and the tears seemed to have soaked into my sleeves. I raised my head. Damn it, what's the point of crying? Crying won't do a damn thing. Only women cry when they're wronged. I need to find a way to get revenge. Chung Yu, I owe all this suffering to you. Dying with you would be too easy. I'll make your life worse than death. I wiped my face hard and stood up. I glanced in my son's direction, making sure he was all right. Then, I forced myself to calm down, waiting for the tear stains to fade before taking him home. Back home, I saw my mother's sorrowful face and my father's numb expression as they sat on the sofa. Their gazes were filled with worry. That suicide note had truly frightened them. I deeply regretted my impulsive and irrational act. They gave birth to me, raised me. They had opposed my marriage to Chung Yu, but they reluctantly accepted it because I loved her so much. Thinking back now, it was me who caused them so much grief, robbing them of peace in their old age. Am I even a man? At that moment, I made up my mind to completely sever ties with Chung-yu and prevent them from affecting my family any further. I don't know if I'll have a second marriage, but at least I have to live better and happier than them. I apologized to my parents, lying that I had written a suicide note to gain sympathy from my workplace and promised to discuss such matters with them in the future. They finally breathed a sigh of relief and advised me to let it go. After my son fell asleep, I went to the study and took out my phone. Calmly, I sent a text message to my mother-in-law. Tell Chung-yu to come back and finalize the divorce. As expected, there was no response. My mother-in-law's family didn't want a divorce, at least not now. They were using my son as leverage, not only wanting to divide the assets, but also wanting more. For my son's sake, I wanted to give Chung-yu a chance to honestly divorce, accept the consequences of her infidelity. That's all. She couldn't just commit such a grave mistake and then righteously bully me. Unfortunately, I underestimated their shamelessness. I waited for more than 10 minutes, still receiving no reply. I understood that they intended to drag this out. The silence in the study felt like a cloth suffocating me. At first, it was out of sight, out of mind in the house without Chung-yu, but now I feel like something is missing. Anger can make adrenaline surge, sustaining a high intensity of revenge. But as time goes by and calm returns, the body feels hollowed out. The disciplinary committee's decision left me dissatisfied and resentful. It never rains, but it pours. My investments in stocks and funds suffered consecutive losses. The current A-share market is a bloodbath, with many retail investors nearly bankrupt. Playing the stock market against big capital is suicide. A few days ago, Wang Tung advised me to pull my money out of the stock market and do something else, as the market was terrible, and it was best to wait for a better opportunity. Preoccupied with revenge, I had forgotten, and now the few stocks I held had plummeted beyond recognition. I felt like my marriage was like those stocks I invested in, decorated on the outside with splendor, but rotten inside. The sudden explosion caused me heavy losses. My marriage is rotten ruined. Rubbing my tired face, I slumped over the desk and cried out in my heart. I'm so tired, truly exhausted. In the following days, I continued to contact my mother-in-law, hoping to finalize the divorce, but still received no response. They were determined to stall, and I was helpless. Chapter 20. Thankfully, my mind had begun to calm down. I spoke calmly, explaining how wrongdoing demands consequences and that the child was innocent. Unfortunately, she didn't care about the child at all, only about using him to gain something. Naturally, I returned empty-handed. Over time, I stopped pushing for a divorce. During this period, Wang Tung and the others invited me for drinks a few times and told me some bad news. Accusations have a time limit. If Chung-yu and Lu could delay things for a few months, the internet would have forgotten about it. Then, the matter could be handled lightly. Once the storm blew over, they could both recover from their dismissals. I looked at Chung-lin, and he nodded, explaining that this was standard procedure. Therefore, the urgent task was to force Chung-yu and Lu out into the open. Otherwise, I would be the only one jumping around while they hid in the shadows laughing. Chung-lin added that since I'd made such a big fuss, Chung-yu's affair was now known in many work units and wouldn't be easily erased. However, Lu likely wouldn't face any disciplinary action. I took a deep breath, finally understanding why Chung-yu was hiding. It was likely Lu's idea, a scheme to hurt me. So, the priority was to find a way to get them back to their work units, to face the disciplinary committee's investigation. But they had taken legitimate leave, and I still didn't know which hospital they were in, let alone how to drag them out. Although they were infamous in our small town, they were just ordinary people in the wider world. No one would recognize them, and even if they did, they probably wouldn't tell me. It was almost impossible for me to gather information alone. After we finished our drinks and parted ways, I walked home alone, the cold wind clearing my head a little. I strolled along the sidewalk, pondering how to force them to appear. Even if I found them, I couldn't just tie them up and deliver them to their work units. I needed to make it unavoidable for them to go back. Passing a square, I saw the Annies packing up their things after their square dancing, leaving the area deserted. The mall was also about to close. As I was about to leave, I suddenly saw a couple up ahead, hugging and cuddling, looking very much in love. They seemed familiar. Suddenly, I stared at the woman's back, my face changing drastically. The half-bald man beside her. I wouldn't forget him even if he were burned to ashes. Damn it. While I was suffering, Chung Yu and Liu, who claimed to be sick, were out shopping, hand in hand, looking very happy. Where was the Chao Tse and painter mother had talked about? My head exploded. Clenching my fists, I rushed towards them. These two dogs, they deserved to die. My son was crying for his mother at home. My parents were hiding in their rooms, sighing, aged overnight. I was running around like a dog to report them, thinking they would be suffering after being dismissed. Who knew they were hiding out, happily together, hand in hand. At that moment, I had only one thought: to kill them. Why could the cheaters live so carefree, without any guilt, and the victim had to bear the pain? What about the innocent parents and child? I chased after them, rounding the corner of the mall, but lost sight of them. There was only a small road ahead, and above the mall was a residential building. They likely lived there. I rushed to the door, but it was locked. I kicked it furiously, looking at my reflection in the glass door, my eyes bloodshot, my face like a devil crawling out of hell. My heart was filled with hatred. I didn't know why. Even though I thought I had let go, I was still so easily provoked. I had promised my parents I wouldn't do anything stupid, but why did the sight of them bring back murderous thoughts? I didn't consider myself an impulsive man, but the rage within easily overwhelmed my reason. Was Chung Yu even human? Abandoning her husband and child, willingly becoming someone's mistress. Even after the whole work unit knew, becoming a laughingstock, she still rushed into the flames like a moth. What was it all for? Squatting by the door, I suddenly felt my life was a complete failure. Chung Yu would rather be a despicable mistress than live a good life with me. Who had honest people offended these days? My emotions have been very unstable these past few days, but to find those two dogs, I had to wait. I was certain they lived inside, but I couldn't go door to door, could I? I tried to compose myself, found a delivery guy on the street, and paid him 500 yuan to borrow his uniform and an empty box. I waited by the door. Finally, a resident came home, and I followed them in. I went straight to the security room and lied, saying that a resident named Liu Jianxi had ordered takeout, trying to find out where he lived. But the security guard couldn't find a resident named Liu Jianxi. I tried Chung Yu's name, but that also yielded no results. At this point, the security guard sensed something was wrong. Perhaps my tone was filled with hostility, and he began warning me not to cause trouble. As he was about to call the police, I slunk out of the building, but I was still unwilling to give up. I waited outside until midnight. During that time, my parents called, saying my son had a cold, and only then did I reluctantly leave. Just as I left the complex, a sack was thrown over my head. Before I could react, a stick slammed against my head. I felt dizzy and a sharp pain. Then my body was hit a few more times. The resentment in my heart, finding an outlet, erupted. Ignoring everything, I blocked a blow with my arm, grabbed one of the attacker's legs, and bit down hard. A scream followed, then curses. My usual workouts paid off. Although I didn't know any boxing, I had stamina and agility. I ripped off the sack and saw two young men who had attacked me. Without a word, I tackled one of them, slamming my fist into his nose. The two seemed surprised by my ferocity. They panicked, didn't fight back, and turned to run. The pain from the blows I had received prevented me from chasing them. I could only watch them escape. Sitting on the ground, I felt warm liquid flowing from my head. My scalp throbbed. Before losing consciousness, I made a phone call and then lay down. When I woke up, I was in a hospital room, the smell of disinfectant stinging my nose, making me feel sick. Wang Ting walked into the ward. Seeing me awake, he was relieved and exclaimed, "You're awake." I breathed a sigh of relief and asked what had happened. It turned out I had been unconscious for a whole night. I immediately tried to call my family, but Wang Ting stopped me, saying he had already told my parents that I was drunk and sleeping at home. Then he asked me why I had been beaten. I told him about seeing Chung Yu and Liu, and how I was ambushed after leaving. Chapter 21. Wang Ting was indignant and furious. It must have been Liu who arranged this. He's so damn arrogant. I've already called the police, but unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras where it happened. That bastard got off easy. Chapter 21. Wang Teng was indignant and furious. It must have been Lu who arranged this. He's so damn arrogant. I've already called the police, but unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras where it happened. That bastard got off easy. My heart was filled with a burning desire for revenge. Initially, for my son's sake, I didn't want to completely destroy Qingyu, but that kind of person doesn't deserve mercy. I spent 3 days in the hospital with Wang Teng taking care of me. Luckily, I blocked the 2 heaviest blows with my phone. Otherwise, it wouldn't have just been a scalp wound. I suspect Lu saw me that night, and, fearing retaliation, decided to strike first. Discharged from the hospital, I stood at the main entrance, clenched my fists, and thought, "You forced my hand. This path is blocked, but I still have to walk it, otherwise Lu will think I'm afraid of him. But I can't be stubborn." During the 3 days in the hospital, I thought a lot. So far, the branch company's disciplinary committee has only suspended Chengyu and Lu, citing their poor health, so I can only resort to other methods. I really regret not recording a video of Chengyu confessing to her affair when she was still at home. If I had that video, even if Chengyu and Lu denied it, it wouldn't matter. It's precisely because of the lack of video evidence that I'm now in such a passive position. Those chat screenshots clearly show something is wrong with their relationship, but the extent of the problem is still up to their interpretation. Many things, when phrased differently, take on a completely different meaning. Those who don't know the truth might even applaud. I racked my brains, but couldn't find a good solution. Wang Teng, worried about my mental state, suggested I go to his place, but I declined, knowing his good intentions. I hadn't been home for 3 days, and my parents must be worried sick. I needed to go home and reassure them. We chatted idly as we walked. Suddenly, we rounded a corner and almost ran into a utility pole. Wang Teng, annoyed, was about to curse to vent his frustration, but seeing me standing still, he thought something was wrong and quickly asked. I pointed to a small advertisement on the utility pole and said, "I have a solution." Wang Teng looked shocked and said with a wry smile, "Fang Yu, are you out of your mind? You believe that?" The utility pole was plastered with small ads, and the one I happened to be pointing at was for seeking sperm donor generous reward. No wonder Wang Teng misunderstood. I shook my head, took a deep breath, and said in a low voice, "I know how to force them out." I didn't answer Wang Teng's further questions. I sneered inwardly. "Since you're shitting on my head and forcing me to eat it, don't blame me for being ruthless. Relying on my own efforts to gather information on them puts me at a disadvantage. I should change my approach. I should let the information come to me. These days, as long as you're willing to spend some money and generate some buzz, with the country's surveillance systems and big data monitoring, I don't believe 2 living people can simply vanish into thin air. I'll definitely put out ads, but I can't leave any loopholes. The people in my work unit probably won't be able to handle Lu, but they're full of bad ideas. To avoid future trouble, I went home, greeted my worried parents, and went straight to my study to research online about portrait rights laws. After studying them thoroughly, I had a general idea of what to do next. Most of the ads on the utility poles are lost dog notices with generous rewards. Why don't I put up a missing person notice? Not only that, but I'll make it something my work unit can't easily handle. My work unit is primarily research-based. We have some power, but not the most. Besides the disciplinary committee hanging over their heads, the only thing they're afraid of is law enforcement. That night, I first put my son to bed, then chatted with my parents, telling them that after a few days of rest, I was almost ready to start a new life and that they shouldn't worry too much. That woman wasn't worth it. Seeing my sincerity, they finally relaxed and went back to their room to sleep. The next day, I went straight to the police station to report a missing person. At the police station, I explained the situation and registered my personal information. An older police officer received me. I said my wife had been missing for days, and I didn't know where she was. Someone had been messaging me on WeChat, but I couldn't confirm their identity. The tone didn't sound like her at all. The old officer asked why my wife had run away, so I started complaining, recounting my wife's affair, abandoning our child, and so on. The old officer sighed. "What's the point of keeping a wife like that? Just put a divorce notice in the newspaper." I was stunned. I hadn't heard of that method before. It sounded as old as the officer, probably a solution from the last century. Then I asked if they could locate my wife using her ID card and phone number. The old officer said it was difficult, requiring an application, and couldn't be used for non-criminal cases. It didn't matter. That wasn't what I wanted. Shortly after registering, I received a text message stating that my case had been accepted by a certain branch and provided a case number. Leaving the police station, I contacted Wang Tung and Lu Feng. I didn't contact Chung Lin. He's a secretary for the city government, and his work circle is quite special. I sent them a message I had prepared earlier, asking them to forward it to various group chats. Finally, I posted a missing person notice on Weibo. I cast a wide net. Now, it was just a matter of waiting to see the results. The results came quickly. That evening, I received a message from my mother-in-law. She cursed viciously. Usually, when I ask her to tell my son a story, she draws a blank, but when it comes to cursing, she doesn't repeat a single dirty word. Her tone was full of anger. She roared, "It must be karma from a past life. I didn't agree to Chungyu marrying you in the first place. I can't believe how cruel you are. Now you've driven her to the point of mental illness. She's dying. Are you happy now?" If I hadn't seen Chungyu and Lu at the mall that night, I might have actually believed her and felt sympathy. After all, she is my son's mother. But Lu hired someone to beat me, practically to death. Chungyu must have known, but didn't stop him, so there's no affection left between us. Now, I just want them both dead. Forget dying. Even if she were already dead, I'd be applauding. I just sneered and didn't respond to her insults. My mother-in-law, probably tired of cursing, changed her tune and pleaded, "Feng Yu, for the sake of our past marriage, don't be so ruthless. Chungyu still has to live. Now everyone is cursing her. She's getting endless calls. She's on the verge of a breakdown." Chapter 22. I couldn't hold back any longer. "Stop playing the victim," I said coldly. "Don't think I don't know she's with that Lu guy now. Cheating, and she thinks she's right? Abandoning her husband and child. Willing to ruin her reputation to be a mistress. That kind of person deserves to die." My mother-in-law was speechless, stammering, trying to appear calm. "Don't slander her. She's clearly in the hospital, getting treatment. I can show you her medical records. Enough with the useless excuses. Get her out here and get the divorce finalized, or she'll be drowned in spit later." My mother-in-law exploded, cursing at me again. I wasn't putting up with it. I tolerated her for Chung-Yu's sake, letting her push me around, thinking I was easy to bully. Now her daughter was shitting on my head and expected me to swallow it. Impossible. I wouldn't let her off the hook. Since she was shameless enough to be a mistress, why should I care about her reputation or future? She deserved it. I hung up, letting out a heavy sigh. My arm still ached from the previous attack. My revenge was just beginning. There was more to come. The missing person notice I posted on Weibo was gaining traction. I decided to manage the account properly, paying for promotion. It might play a bigger role later. That evening, I carefully studied the platform's rules for posting information and researched relevant laws, specifically regarding missing person notices. I used Lu's official photo from his company website and a casual photo of Chungyu, with a line covering her eyes. If they sued me for violating her portrait rights, I could argue I'd obscured her face. Money can solve a lot of problems. Chung Lin had experience in new media operations and introduced me to some useful resources. With a little investment, the post's popularity soared. It went viral again. I shared my story, tearfully recounting the events. It was all true, nothing fabricated. Reading it over, I felt even more wrong than Wu Daolong. This earned me a lot of sympathy online. Many people started bombarding Chungyu with calls and texts. My mother-in-law said Chungyu was on the verge of a breakdown. I believed her. Her suffering brought me comfort. Whether or not she had a mental breakdown was irrelevant to me. As long as I could force her to come out and face the disciplinary committee, that was all that mattered. Public opinion was a huge help. I was certain Chengyu's workplace would contact me soon. Sure enough, the next day, Uncle Chin called, his tone filled with resignation. As the resident nice guy at her workplace, he tried to persuade me to delete the Weibo post, saying the negative publicity was damaging to the company's reputation and bad for our child's future. I stuck to my prepared arguments. I explained that I only involved her workplace as a last resort. If anyone found Chungyu, they could notify her unit. Weren't they looking for her too? Uncle Chin was speechless. I continued, saying that since Chungyu had done something so shameful, our child was already severely affected. She needed to come out, get divorced, and face the disciplinary committee. That was the only way to resolve the issue. I was helping the company. Uncle Chin chuckled wryly, admitting defeat. He asked why I had to drag Lu Jianxi into it. I fell silent. I knew that was the real reason for his call. He wanted me to leave Lu out of it, or at least delete the information about him. If I did that, everything was negotiable. I frowned, holding back my anger. I had underestimated Lu. Everything was negotiable? I was glad I'd researched the relevant laws before posting. It would be nearly impossible for Chengyu and Lu to sue me. I was confident about that. Suppressing my fury, I said in a low voice, "Uncle Chin, I call you uncle out of respect. Lu is the one who destroyed my marriage and family. You should know how I feel about him." This time, Uncle Chin was silent. I added, "Don't try to persuade me. What's done is done. If I want to hide, fine. I'll wait for the rest of my life until this is resolved." Seeing my resolve, Uncle Chin stopped trying to persuade me. He said the company was following standard procedures and wasn't protecting anyone. As soon as they arrived at work, the disciplinary committee would question them. After hanging up with Uncle Chin, I received a call from the police. They had found Chengyu. She had called them herself, saying she hadn't been missing and asking me to withdraw the case. Of course, I refused. I said she had only called, not actually appeared. Who knew if she was being coerced? I needed to see her in person to be sure. "Let's see what you do next, Lu." As the story gained momentum, within just 3 days, it reached the 10th spot on the trending topics list. The city was small. Practically everyone knew about it. My mother-in-law messaged me again, her tone much softer this time. She begged me to show mercy. Chengyu was afraid to leave the house and had developed depression. If I wanted my son to see his mother again, I shouldn't push her over the edge. I hung up without a word. I didn't want to deal with her. She then sent a barrage of voice messages, undoubtedly filled with curses and insults. If I wasn't so eager to divorce Chengyu and needed a way to contact her, I would have deleted my mother-in-law's WeChat contact. Seeing my determination, my mother-in-law sent one last message. "If my daughter dies, you'll be buried with her." I shot back that a woman like her dying would be a contribution to society, preventing her from harming others. After venting my frustration, I stopped replying. After the Weibo post blew up, many people were following the story. Lu, however, claimed he was under immense stress, had developed heart problems, and was hospitalized. I knew it was a delaying tactic. Then, Wang Tung told me Chengyu, unable to bear the barrage of calls and messages, had jumped to her death. For a moment I panicked. How could such news suddenly surface? But then I looked at my mother-in-law's WeChat, silent for days, and I had an inkling. This was most likely a ploy. I quickly understood their sinister intentions. People tend to forgive the dead, unless they were truly evil. With Chengyu under fire from all sides, news of her suicide would shift public opinion. Chapter 23. All right, well played. This retreat as an advanced melodrama really is admirable. It genuinely put me on the defensive for several days. Based on what Wang Tung told me and the screenshots he showed, people at Chengyu's workplace were bad-mouthing me. Some groups were bashing me. And the same thing was happening on Weibo. This is getting interesting. I never thought a couple could still play palace intrigue games. This should be the first time I've been on the offensive against Chengyu and Lu, while they're on the defensive. Chengyu's attempted suicide and Lu's supposed heart attack, after spreading online, did cause me quite a bit of trouble. The number of people cursing me online started to increase. But I didn't care. I was waiting for an opportunity. Haven't I suffered enough humiliation and injustice during this time? I'm immune to even the harshest words. I was just waiting for my chance. Ever since my Weibo account became popular, it attracted a lot of attention. Onlookers, Lu's competitors, even his uncle's enemies. It's a mixed bag, but I'm certain some of them are stirring the pot and don't want the hype to die down. Sure enough, after a few days of being cursed at, someone sent me a private message. It was a photo, with the time and location noted, of Chengyu arm in arm with Lu shopping. Even though I was somewhat prepared, seeing those two lovebirds together made me curse out loud. I'd actually felt a flicker of pity when I heard about Chengyu's suicide attempt. I was such an idiot. Someone as heartless and selfish as Chengyu, who abandoned her husband and child, would never actually kill herself. Regardless of who sent me the private message or their motive, it helped me. I edited it slightly and posted the picture on Weibo. Weren't one of them supposed to have jumped off a building and the other hospitalized with a heart attack? Why are they happily shopping together? The picture caused a huge reaction. The netizens who had previously defended Chung Yu all apologized to me. Chung Yu and Lu were in trouble. They had deceived the public and faced the backlash. I had a hunch that the picture from the stranger might be the turning point in dealing with Lu. Naturally, I hoped that under the pressure of public opinion, Lu would be punished. But he remained unfazed, like a pig isn't afraid of boiling water. Not only that, he even sent me a message to taunt me. Even through the phone screen, I could imagine his arrogant face. I was furious and threatened to kill him. Of course, he didn't take it seriously. I thought this would drag on, but just a few days after the photo incident, Lu actually called me. Haven't given up yet? His voice made my adrenaline spike. That dog, Lu Jianxi, dared to call me? Wasn't he asking for it? I cursed him out, disregarding any pretense of civility. I remembered being attacked in that alley, and my head still hurt. Last warning. If you continue to report me, I won't be so gentle. Look, Fang Yu, we're both men. Women are just clothes. If they don't fit, you change them. Why make this into a blood feud? It's not doing you any good. Lu chuckled, his tone playful. Tell you what, I don't want her anymore. I'll tell Qingyu to go back and live a good life with you. How about it? I swore at him, gritting my teeth. Only if you let your mother and your wife sleep with me for 2 years. If you can accept that, then I can. How about it, Lu? I have plenty of time. We can play this game slowly. Lu said unhappily. Fang Yu, I'm trying to reason with you. Don't be ungrateful. Don't think I'm afraid of you. This isn't good for either of us. And Chung Yu's suicide attempt was real. She broke her leg. I sneered, saying harshly, why didn't she just die? Abandoning her husband and child for a scumbag like you. Even God can't stand it. That's just spiteful talk. You can see Qingyu really doesn't want a divorce. We have been together recently, but we haven't done anything inappropriate. I swear on my character. Lu paused, then added, for the sake of your years of marriage, don't force her to a dead end. Honestly, I don't care. You can't touch me anyway. He was right. It had been over 6 months since I discovered Qingyu's affair. Although my reports were successful, they were only dismissed from their positions. Anyone could persuade me to withdraw the complaint, but Lu's fake compassion was infuriating. He slept with my wife, had me beaten up, shit on my head, and expected me to swallow it. This kind of person deserves to go to hell. Seeing that I was unmoved, Lu dropped the pretense and snorted coldly. I've given you a chance. You have parents and a child. Don't get hit by a car when you go out. Oh, and I forgot to mention, although Qingyu is a bit older, she's really good. Of all the women I've been with, she's the most obedient and cooperative. I was enraged. I rarely argued, but at that moment I hurled every insult I could think of. Lu hung up, but I continued to curse. I don't know how long I cursed for. Leaning against the wall, I felt lightheaded, almost having been driven mad by Lu. I told myself to calm down, to not lose my composure. Lu wouldn't call me for no reason. Someone must be pressuring him to resolve the issue of the complaint. But with my current intelligence-gathering abilities, aside from some insignificant gossip on Weibo, I was completely in the dark about the higher-ups in the company. I had a feeling that Lu's urgency was related to the higher-ups, but I needed to find out the specifics. Suppressing my anger, I went to Qingyu's workplace. This time, the security guard wouldn't let me in, not to target me, but because a provincial inspection team was there to review logistics projects. I nodded. With such a high-level inspection team present, the company's secretary probably wouldn't have time for my petty issues. Wait a minute. I turned around, about to leave, when I suddenly realized that Lu's pleading might be related to the inspection team. If it was related, could I use this to my advantage? File a higher-level complaint? Lu wanted me to drop the matter, but he couldn't bring himself to back down completely. He must be feeling the pressure. If my complaint was about misconduct, it could be big or small. But if it was about corruption, that would be serious. Qingyu climbed the ranks so quickly because she knew how to play the game. She managed logistics at her workplace, and that's precisely what the provincial inspection team was investigating. As Qingyu's superior, Lu couldn't escape responsibility if something went wrong. If I could find something on him and report it directly to the inspection team, it would simplify things. Chapter 24. My marriage with Qingyu lasted over a decade. Although I was the one putting in most of the effort, I'm much more capable than her. If I wasn't naturally averse to chasing promotions and wealth, to brag a little, I would have been a deputy section chief long ago. Ever since I reported Chungyu and that Lu guy, the consequences have been severe, but I knew what I was getting into, and I'm prepared to accept it. Worst case scenario, I'll quit my job. Chungyu often asked me to help with her annual work summaries because she had limited time on the job. I just search online and wing it based on my gut feeling. A work summary isn't as hard as a graduation thesis, right? Of course, Chungyu would also ask me some sensitive questions. Back then, Chungyu hadn't cheated, and our relationship was pretty good, so we didn't have many reservations. But there's something I can't quite recall. I remember Chungyu mentioning the misappropriation of public funds a few times. Things are becoming clearer. I definitely remember this incident, but I can't remember when it happened. Back home, I started rummaging through everything. Fueled by the desire to punish those two dogs, I searched tirelessly until midnight, but couldn't find the data and notes I needed. I felt discouraged. I figured if Chungyu dared to cheat, she wouldn't leave any evidence behind, so it was probably a lost cause. However, I did find something infuriating. In her makeup cabinet, I found a receipt for a 30,000 yuan watch. I don't remember Chungyu ever giving me such an expensive watch. I opened Chungyu's phone, checked the purchase history against the date, and finally figured out the trick. Chungyu bought a watch last year, around my birthday. At the time, I assumed she spent so much money to surprise me, so I didn't say anything. Now, that watch never made it to my hands. It must have been a gift for that Lu guy. Like an idiot, I actually went through Chungyu and Lu's chat logs. That son of a bitch has the same birthday as me. Chungyu used my money to buy a watch for her lover. I'm the biggest fool in the world. How can I swallow this? I have to destroy them. Perhaps the fury of revenge sharpened my mind. I finally remembered the incident Chungyu told me about. It was December 2 years ago, nearing the end of the year. Chungyu was playing with our son, sitting across the dinner table with a worried look on her face. I finally remembered this was the troublesome matter Chungyu encountered shortly after her promotion. I even helped her come up with a plan. See? Your husband would never harm you. I told you keeping the evidence would be useful. Suppressing my rage, I started searching my computer. I found the folder where Chungyu usually hid her secrets. The data inside matched perfectly. However, since it was only data, it couldn't be used as primary evidence. I needed supporting evidence. Fighting back nausea, I pulled up Chungyu and Lu's conversations. Seeing those disgusting messages, my blood boiled. I finally found their chat logs from December 2 years ago. After reading them, I was ecstatic, knowing they were both done for. That Lu guy was clearly involved. If Chungyu is investigated, no one in her department will escape. This is a game changer. Although it's only a few tens of thousands of yuan, the nature of the issue is extremely serious. I specifically looked up the relevant laws and regulations and knew I had them. Secrets can't stay hidden forever. The dirt they've buried will eventually be unearthed. Chungyu and Lu will get what they deserve. With my trump card in hand, my mood improved significantly. I invited Wang Tung and a few others out for drinks. Wang Tung, seeing my improved spirits, thought I was finally over it. He patted my shoulder and said, "There are plenty of fish in the sea. Don't ruin the rest of your life over someone who isn't worth it. I'll set you up on a date sometime. My fiancé knows some good ones." Chung Lin and Lu Feng echoed his sentiments. We had a good time. I didn't tell them about the evidence on my laptop. Firstly, it's none of their business. Wang Tung and the others have helped me a lot recently, and I'm grateful. Secondly, they couldn't help even if they wanted to. The provincial inspection team is still here, supposedly to give our unit a hard time. The municipal government wanted a loan for road construction, but our unit rejected them, so the inspection team is here to retaliate. It's just a formality. They don't expect to find any real problems. Both sides will continue to cooperate in the future. But Chungyu's unit wouldn't dream that I've found evidence of their corruption. When the inspection team sees this, they won't be able to sweep it under the rug. As the drinks flowed, we chatted about a lot. For the past 6 months, to get revenge on Chungyu and Lu, I've been consumed by hatred and anger, losing myself and becoming the biggest cuckold in this small city. But I have no regrets, except for the guilt I feel towards my parents and child. My parents have always had a good reputation around here. My dad used to be a minor official. Now, our family's misfortune, thanks to a modern-day Panjinlian, has become the neighborhood joke. I know my parents are hurting. They used to love going out for walks, but now they mostly stay home, avoiding contact with others except for taking my son to kindergarten and grocery shopping. Thinking about how my parents' reputations have been tarnished because of me my hatred for Chung Yu intensifies. It's not my fault. I'm the victim here. And then there's my son. He's only 3 years old and doesn't understand anything. When he grows up, without a mother's presence, will his personality be affected? These aren't things I need to worry about right now. As the night wound down, Wang Teng put his arm around me and said seriously, Fang Yu, I'm not kidding. My wife knows a lot of good women, definitely not like your ex-wife. Make time to meet them. You can't dwell on the past forever. I pushed him away irritably. I'm not in the mood for dating or marriage right now. Besides, given my current situation, I'm practically an internet celebrity. What woman would want me? I can't ruin someone else's life. I dismissed Wang Teng's words and hailed a cab home. I had half a gin of alcohol and felt a bit tipsy. Looking out the window at the city lights, I remained silent. With things coming to an end, what should I do next? I'll probably need a long time to lick my wounds. I don't know when I'll escape the shadow of this marriage. I gave my heart and soul to Chung Yu for over a decade, only to be left with scars. I don't know if I can ever trust love again. Sigh. What am I even thinking? I'm not even divorced yet, and I'm already thinking about future relationships and marriage. Chapter 25. Driving slowly this time, traffic was heavy at night. I got the driver's permission, lit a cigarette, opened the window, and saw an infuriating scene. Ignoring the traffic, I flung open the car door and rushed out. That bitch, Chung Yu, actually had the audacity to stroll hand-in-hand with Liu. The blissful smile on her face showed that even if the affair came with a heavy price, she didn't regret it one bit. This enraged me even more. My devotion of over a decade was nothing but trash in her eyes. What was so good about Liu? He already had a wife, and yet he was openly parading around with Chung Yu. Seeing these two scumbags, I lost control. I grabbed Chung Yu's hair and slapped her across the face. I knew hitting someone was wrong, but I wanted to kill them. Chung Yu screamed. She hadn't expected it to be me, and her face turned pale. The ridiculous thing was, when Liu saw me, he didn't protect Chung Yu. He just ran. Chung Yu probably hadn't expected this either. Looking around and seeing no one, her expression turned fearful. I didn't have a mirror, so I couldn't see my own face, but it must have been terrifying. I thought Chung Yu might show some guilt at being caught, but I underestimated her shamelessness. Seeing that she couldn't escape, Chung Yu dropped the act. She yelled, Fang Yu, if you had treated me better, would I have cheated? You don't look at your own problems. You just blame others. It takes two to tango. She pointed at me angrily, seemingly wanting to vent all the pent-up frustration she'd been holding in while hiding. Apparently, all her current misery was my fault. Our relationship is over. There's no point in continuing. If you still care about our decade-plus together, let me go. I love Liu Jianxi. He's better than you in every way, understand? You're the biggest loser in the world. The biggest regret of my life is marrying you. This was our first encounter since Chung Yu left home. It was as if we had a blood feud, stabbing each other with verbal daggers. Chung Yu's hysterical words in particular made me realize that our decade-plus relationship was a huge joke. My contributions to the family, even if not meritorious, were at least hard work. But in Chung Yu's eyes, it wasn't worth a single toe of Liu's. Get lost and don't bother me. Chung Yu cursed, glared at me, and turned to walk towards Liu. She was still thinking of him. I watched her receding figure, suddenly feeling like she was a complete stranger. This was the woman I had deeply loved for over a decade. I was truly blind. Back home, I couldn't sleep. I spent the entire night smoking in the study. The next day, I took the evidence I'd gathered to the provincial inspection team. Ever since I learned about Chung Yu's affair, I'd been reading detective and mystery novels and watching films. No one taught me how to fight people like Liu, how an ordinary person could fight those with power and connections. My only recourse was the internet and methods like petitioning higher authorities. I still didn't know if petitioning would work, but I held back some of the evidence. If the inspection team buckled under pressure and tried to sweep things under the rug, I was prepared to release the evidence online. Every time I thought of Chung Yu's face, I felt sick to my stomach. I'd heard she'd attempted suicide by jumping from a building and had softened because of our son, but now it seemed she didn't understand her mistakes at all, let alone regret the affair. In her eyes, my over a decade of hard work wasn't worth a single toe of Liu's. Now, they could enjoy their love affair behind bars. The handling of the case was faster than I expected. First, Uncle Chin from Chung Yu's workplace panicked. When it wasn't their business, they could stand on moral high ground and advise me to let it go. Now that it involved them, they were far more anxious than I had been. I saw his name on my phone screen, but didn't rush to answer. I let it ring for a while, but Uncle Chin kept calling, as if he wanted to break my phone. I deliberately waited for 15 minutes before leisurely answering. Uncle Chin said with a wry smile, "Fong Yu, what are we going to do about this? It's blown up so big, the whole unit is in chaos." I feigned surprise. As a law-abiding citizen, reporting corruption is my duty. "Don't tell me you're involved, Uncle Chin?" Uncle Chin knew I was mocking him, but he didn't dare to argue. He pleaded, "Can we talk?" I shook my head and said helplessly, "No, I was almost kicked out of the office last time. I'm just an ordinary person. I don't dare go back." Uncle Chin sighed and said seriously, "Look, it was my fault before, not reporting your accusations in a timely manner." The unit leaders held an emergency meeting and decided to cooperate with the branch company's disciplinary inspection committee. "Will that work?" I fell silent. I was more than willing to deal with Chung Yu and Liu, but offending all the unit leaders would make things very difficult in the future. I just wanted revenge on Chung Yu and Liu. I didn't care about anyone else. If all the unit leaders went down, I wouldn't have a future either, and even my family and friends could be implicated. After weighing it up, I agreed to go to the office the next day. Uncle Chin was relieved that I'd relented. He swore, "Fong Yu, don't worry. You'll get a satisfactory explanation tomorrow." I hung up the phone and shook my head. Just 2 days ago, when I'd found the evidence, Uncle Chin had sung a completely different tune. Not long after, I received another call from an unknown number. The other side was silent for a moment. Then, without his previous arrogance, he sighed, "Brother, why did it have to come to this?" "I'm sorry, okay?" I said coldly. "Now you're scared. If you had been tougher, I might have considered you a man, but you're a coward, a scumbag, and you deserve to go to hell." Lou didn't argue. He just kept apologizing. "Look, I'm already miserable. I've been dismissed. My family is in turmoil. My wife wants a divorce. My future is ruined. I admit I regret it. What will it take for you to calm down?" "Brother, even killing someone isn't as bad as this. Even if you hate me, Chung Yu is still the mother of your child. She's in a bad state right now. What if?" "Then let her die." Hearing Chung Yu's name coming out of Lu's mouth made me sick. What right did he have to use her to threaten me? Chapter 26. Mr. Lu took a deep breath, seemingly furious yet afraid to explode. He'd lost his former confidence. Now that the truth was out, everyone involved would be dragged down. I didn't believe his enemies wouldn't seize this opportunity to take a bite out of him. Mr. Lu saw I was unmoved and finally lost his temper, shouting, "Fong Yu, just you wait. If I'm going down, you're coming with me." I ignored his threat. It was more productive to figure out how to explain things to the investigators. The truth was finally coming to light, and I saw hope. After humiliating Mr. Lu, I felt a sense of relief. The hardship I had endured for the past 6 months finally had an outlet. Unexpectedly, Chung Yu contacted me, wanting to see our son via video call. I refused. Now, facing jail time, she suddenly wanted to see her son? When she was with Mr. Lu, she didn't show this much concern. She deserved it. But the next day, I received a call from my mother-in-law that left me stunned. Chung Yu had jumped from the 9th floor of her office building. Her fate was unknown. My mother-in-law sent photos confirming it. She was currently in the ICU. When I arrived at the hospital, my in-laws lunged at me, wanting to take me down with them. I was numb, staring at the woman inside, my mind blank. Seeing Chung Yu's condition, I questioned whether I had gone too far, if I had been too cruel to my son's mother. I remembered picking up my son from school a few days prior. He's no longer a baby and needs his mother. He's become fond of his young teacher, reluctant to part ways each day. The most awkward moment was when a classmate's mother, who resembled Chung Yu, played with my son after school. He held both our hands, making us look like a family. I quickly let go. Every time I saw my son missing his mother, a voice inside told me not to push things too far. She was his mother, after all. If he learned I was responsible for her loss, how would he view me when he grew up? I let my mother-in-law hit me, feeling numb as I watched Chung Yu. Her suicide was a tragic act of desperation. But what enraged me was that she did it not out of shame or remorse, but to protect Mr. Lu. This extinguished any remaining sympathy. Fury consumed me. Mr. Liu had driven her to this, yet he remained unscathed. If she died, he'd walk away virtually free. He'd had an affair with my wife and then manipulated her into suicide, emerging as the victor. And what was I? I wiped the blood from my lip, filled with murderous intent. Scum like him didn't deserve to live. I'd constantly warned myself against impulsive actions. It wasn't worth ruining my life for him. But now, I couldn't help but want to kill him. I left the hospital and rushed to his workplace. I was going to make him pay. As I reached the entrance, ready to confront him, police emerged escorting Mr. Liu into a car. I was stunned. The security guard later told me Mr. Liu was arrested for attempted murder. He'd pushed Cheng-Yu, trying to silence her. Apparently, she had second thoughts, and he sensed it. She'd turned on her camera, the video automatically syncing to her younger sister's phone. The footage captured everything, leaving him with no defense. Even with powerful connections, he was likely finished. Attempted murder was a far more serious charge than corruption. He might never leave prison. Even if he did, what future would he have? Wasn't this more satisfying than taking matters into my own hands? Watching him being taken away, my murderous rage dissipated. Staring at the familiar building, I felt a sense of emptiness. I'd gotten my revenge, but there was no joy. It had been 6 months since I learned of Cheng-Yu's affair. I'd been living for revenge, becoming a shadow of my former self. Someone driven by vengeance is possessed by a demon. But was this the resolution I wanted? I didn't know. I knew there was still much to deal with. Regardless of Cheng-Yu's recovery, I was getting a divorce. When my son was older, whether he hated me or not, I wouldn't have a choice. I could only try to mend things. Maybe Wang Teng was right. I could find someone else and start over. But I no longer had the courage for marriage. It had hurt me too deeply. I returned to my apartment and saw my parents waiting with my son downstairs. They seemed to know about Mr. Liu's arrest. My son ran and jumped into my arms. I stroked his head, sighing. From now on, it would just be the two of us.